Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the July 2025 Ordinary Council meeting. We acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their elders past and present. I would like to advise everyone that the audio and video of this meeting is being live streamed to YouTube. I request everyone to please turn off your mobile phones. I remind you that any recording of the meeting proceedings and photography within the chamber is prohibited unless prior approval has been granted, and councillors and city officers are reminded to disclose any declarations of financial interests and interests affecting impartiality, and are requested to activate their microphones when addressing the meeting. So, with that, we go to item 1, which is the declaration of opening. I declare this meeting open at 1 minute past 6 p.m. Item 2 is a disclaimer. The City of South Perth disclaims any liability for any loss arising from any person or body relying on any statement, discussion, recommendation or decision made during this meeting. Item 3 is announcements from the presiding member, that's me. Councillors, on Friday the 11th of July, we said goodbye to Mr. Gary Adams, and I'm very sorry to farewell Gary. He first commenced at the City of South Perth as the Director of Corporate Services in September of 2021. During his time at the City, Gary was involved in a great many very important transactions and changes here at the City of South Perth. He oversaw the transition of Collier Park Retirement Village to Amana Living, the Collier Park Golf Course redevelopment, and the Dome Cafe that's been established at the former Manning Library site. Thanks to Gary and the team that he led, the City's financial position has demonstrably improved over the last 4 years, with the City transitioning from consecutive operating losses to consecutive operating surpluses. This, in turn, has allowed for the replenishment of the City's financial reserves necessary for making responsible provision for the replacement and renewal of vital community infrastructure and assets in the future. The City has also adopted a consistent practice of limiting council rates movements equal to or below the corresponding movements in Perth CPI. Gary was appointed the acting CEO of the City of South Perth, commencing on the 3rd of April 2025 until the 30th of June 2025. We've all been very grateful for Gary's knowledge, his experience, his leadership and his wisdom, and we wish him the very best in his new role. Councillors, will you please join me in showing your appreciation for former Director of Corporate Services, Mr. Gary Adams. Presiding members report. So at this stage of the agenda, I'm obliged to present this month's mayoral report. And for those members of the gallery who might be new, Council passed a motion at the October 2024 Ordinary Council meeting. That motion resolved that at each Ordinary Council meeting, I will present a report of the mayoral engagements and meetings attended by me in my capacity as Mayor since the last Council meeting. And the reasons in support of that motion stated that this practice is considered essential for maintaining transparency, fairness and accountability, allowing both councillors and the community to be fully informed of the Mayor's activities and enabling them to participate more effectively in council deliberations. The first part of the report requires me to present a summary of the events attended and persons met by me in my capacity as Mayor since the last council meeting. And councillors, the last council meeting was held on Tuesday the 24th of June 2025. So naturally enough, I'll begin from Wednesday the 25th of June 2025. Here goes. On Wednesday, the 25th of July, I helped host the city's Speak with Confidence Awards, where students from 5 local primary schools impressed audiences and judges alike with their exceptionally eloquent and entertaining public speaking skills. On Friday, the 27th of June, I attended the Rotary Club of Mill Point's annual changeover lunch to help welcome the incoming committee and thank the outgoing committee for their service to our community. On Monday, the 30th of June, I met with Councillor Jennifer Navard to discuss council affairs. We met at local business, Crankin Cafe in Como. And later that same day, I met with Acting CEO Gary Adams, as he then was, and the city's communications team. As you all know, I meet with the city CEO and the city's communication team once per week to discuss current and upcoming communications by the city, potential third-party media that's relevant to the city, and my duties as spokesperson for the city. And in an effort to try and cut down the length of this report, I'll note that I also met with the city's communications team on the 7th of July, 14th of July, and the 21st of July for the same purpose. On Tuesday, the 1st of July, I met with Colin Napier, the president of the Hensman Park Tennis Club. And again, as many of you already know, I do try and make myself available to the various sporting clubs and community organisations in our city to better understand their needs and get a perspective on what the city might be able to do to help keep our district a really nice place for people to live, work and play. Same day, 1st of July, I met with Acting CEO Matthew Scott. As you all know, I meet with the CEO or Acting CEO at least once a week to discuss the local government's affairs and the performance of its functions in line with Section 2.8 of the Local Government Act. And once again, in an effort to try and reduce the length of this report, I'll note that I also met with Mr Scott on the 8th of July, the 15th of July and today for the same purposes. Still on Tuesday the 1st of July, I met with the committee of the Manning Memorial Bowling Club before attending the Urban Greening Strategy Update and Sir James Mitchell Park Foreshore Project Councillor Workshop that's mentioned on page 6 of the agenda. On Wednesday the 2nd of July, I met with Ryan Van Beek, the president of the Trinity Aquinas Football Club, for an update on how the club's been going and what their upcoming priorities are. Later that day, I represented the City of South Perth at the grand opening of the brand new Socklich & Co showrooms in Mill Point Road, South Perth. That evening, I attended Como Secondary College to help judge the finals of the Just Start It program. Just Start It is a brilliant 18-week educational program run in high schools that teaches students the value of the partnership of technology and business. Teams are formed of hackers, hawkers and hipsters and are led through the process of creating their own startup, from idea creation to app development to business plan development to budgeting to monetisation and market strategy. I've been involved with the program for 3 years now, and it never ceases to amaze me just how creative and dedicated those student teams are. Thursday the 3rd of July, I met with Phil Carney, the new president of Como Bowling Club, for an update as to how the club's been going and what their priorities are. Friday the 4th of July, I dropped in to catch up with the members of the Manning Men's Shed, and as with our sporting clubs, I like to make myself available to our community clubs and associations to keep abreast of what's happening and understand how the city might be of service. Saturday the 5th of July, I attended the Manning Rippers Football Club to catch up with President Callum Rogers and Vice President Scott Greer, once again for an update on how the club's been going and what their priorities are. Monday the 7th of July, I represented the city along with Councillors Jennifer Navard and Hayley Prendeville at the city's NAIDOC Week flag raising ceremony at the South Perth Community Hall. And it just so happened it was the school holidays, so I had my 2 young children with me, and we very much enjoyed participating in the community activities following the formal ceremony. Wednesday the 9th of July and Thursday the 10th of July, I attended and participated in both of the CEO Selection Committee meetings on those dates. I also met with our local State Member of Parliament, Mr Jeff Baker, MLA, on Thursday the 10th of July. We met at local business Mecca Gourmet in Village Green in Carrawarra. And again, as the councillors know, Mr Baker and I meet up approximately once a month to discuss issues of importance at our local community and consider what options are available at both a local government and a state government level to make this district an ever better place to live, work and play. Saturday the 12th of July, I was delighted to attend and offer a toast at the Hensman Park Tennis Club Centenary Dinner at Royal Perth Golf Club. And once again, I was reminded of how important clubs like the Hensman Park Tennis Club are for a strong and vibrant community. Places where people come together, stay active, share good times and build lifelong friendships. Congratulations once again to Hensman Park Tennis Club on 100 years of fun, sportsmanship and camaraderie. I'm very proud to be your patron. Sunday the 13th of July, I drove out to Dwellingup to serve as a volunteer chef for the day at a Thrive WA camp. That was a great opportunity to see firsthand the great work being done for some of WA's most vulnerable children. Some of you might know Thrive WA by their former name, which was Edmund Rice Camp for Kids. They've got their base of operations right here in the city of South Perth, and that was a real privilege to meet with and engage with these amazing young people, both campers and camp leaders alike, and gain an appreciation as to why these camps matter so much. Thursday the 15th of July, I served as presiding member at the July Council Agenda Briefing. Monday the 21st of July, I met with Councillor Hayley Prendeville to discuss council affairs. We met up at local business Bread Espresso in Como. And that brings us up to tonight's ordinary council meeting. Second part of the report. The second part of council's resolution requires me to present an overview of the key issues, initiatives and matters that I've been addressing in my capacity as mayor since the last council meeting. Councillors are already aware of this, but the main issues I've been working on since the last council meeting and for a number of months now is how elected members can work better with each other and the city administration to best deliver on our community's priorities. And given that we're in the process of recruiting for a new CEO, ensuring that the process for recruiting and appointing the city's new CEO is managed properly. And with that, we're up to date. Item 4, attendances. 4.1 is apologies. I haven't received any apologies. Item 4.2 is approved leaves of absence. Councillor Glenn Cridland has an approved leave of absence for the period of 15 July 2025 to 17 August 2025 inclusive, and Councillor Bronwyn Moore has an approved leave of absence for the period of 7 July 2025 to 23 July 2025 inclusive, but she's here and present tonight. Item 4.3 is parental leave. Councillor Nick Coveney has an approved period of parental leave for the period of 4 June 2025 to 4 December 2025 inclusive, but once again, he's here and present tonight. Item 5, declarations of interest. Councillor Nick Coveney has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as I have spoken and met with several residents from both sides of this debate. Councillor Nick Coveney has also declared an impartiality interest in item 12.1 as I have spoken with and met with several residents from both sides of this debate. And Councillor Andre Brender-Abrandis has declared an impartiality interest in item 12.1 as Mr David Coldham, a resident of Jubilee Street, South Perth, contacted me on 21 July 2025 regarding this item. The views from Mr Coldham's property may or may not be affected in the future regarding the 6 juvenile trees proposed for removal. My decision making on this agenda item will be unaffected as it will be based on merit. Councillors, does anyone else have any declarations that they wish to declare this evening? Councillor Navard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a declaration for 12.1. Which is the replacement of 6 juvenile trees planted on the south side of Lake Douglas. My declaration is impartial, and the reason for this is that I live in proximity to public lands with many trees. My interests are impartial as these relate to planting on or removing trees from public lands, the topic of agenda item 12.1.
Thank you very much. Councillors, any further declarations? Councillor Waugh?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have, over the last week, been contacted by quite a number of people on both sides of the debate, and I have engaged with them in respect of wherever people contacted me, but I don't know any of them personally. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, any other interests to declare? No. Okay. All right. That brings us to item 6, which is public question time. Item 6.1 is responses to previous questions taken on notice. That's nil. Item 6.2 is public question time. So I now open public question time at 6:15 p.m. This evening, we've got 12 people registered to ask a total of 31 questions. So given the rather large number of questions we've got, please ensure that you limit any preamble and please refrain from asking any questions if it's already been answered by, someone asking the same question before you. I'll begin by inviting Mr. Mark Kendall of Winthrop. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome to you, and we look forward to your question.
Good evening all. Do I stand or sit?
You can sit. No, we try not to be too formal.
Thank you for allowing me this opportunity. I, and on behalf of 85 golfing patrons who recently signed a petition to the council and presented it to the office on the 25th of May, but it did not align with the requirements and so was not tabled, request that the City of Perth, in its own right or in conjunction with the lessee of the facility at the Collier Park Golf Course, please provide the patrons with some protection from the bitter winter elements when using the portico that's provided by installing cafe blinds or temporary fencing with adequate sheeting to provide shelter to an area protecting at least 50% of the total area of the portico at the western end, and that the heaters that are installed be operative, as it is near on impossible to sit out there in winter, and we spend around about $500 a week at that complex, 6 of us, and have been golfing for the last 40 years. So we would really appreciate it. We understand fully that it's under redevelopment, but the proposal that I put up to the council is very simple, very cheap, very portable. That's it, thanks.
Thank you for the question. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So the City is aware of the suggestions that low-cost temporary sides could be installed to the existing structure. Any kinds of sides on the structure would need to be assessed for potential wind loading impacts and the ability of the structure to withstand these loads. It's especially a risk in winter. There's also other operational risks that need to be considered before installing sides to the area that you're mentioning. Therefore, the City does not support using funds to make modifications to the facility, given that the new development is imminent. The City intends to maintain the facility as is and looks forward to the new facility being in place.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo, and thank you, Mr Kendall, for the question.
Thank you.
I'd now like to invite Ms Kay Poe of Como. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
Good evening. My questions relate to agenda item 12.1, Councillor Coveney's notice of motion, which seeks to remove 6 trees from Lake Douglas and replace them with low-level planting at a cost of $30,000 to ratepayers. Some elected members have publicly claimed to support tree protection, yet their actions have contradicted those claims, contributing to the council's poor track record on the issue. As such, there is concern that this motion could set a precedent that would enable councillors to submit further tree removal requests without regard for expert advice or strategic policies, ultimately diminishing community value and placing an unnecessary financial burden on ratepayers. Question 1. Can the City clarify if there are any policies or mechanisms to prevent councillors from pushing tree removal motions that are not supported by the broader community, or is the decision entirely at the discretion of the elected members?
Thank you for the question. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The City is not aware of any mechanism to prevent council from making this decision.
Thank you. Question 2. Councillor Coveney is essentially asking ratepayers to fund landscaping of the foreshore, which is public land, to suit the aesthetic preferences of a few private residents as if it were their own backyard. If this motion is supported, other residents living opposite the foreshore may have similar expectations. Can the city confirm how many homes are located opposite the foreshore and explain the potential financial impact on ratepayers if similar motions are submitted and approved?
Thank you. Ms Amprema?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The city has not collected data on the number of residences that overlook the city's foreshores. Given the number of variables, it is hard to estimate potential financial impact. The city is bound on three sides by the Swan and Canning rivers, and the number of properties with views over the foreshore reserves would be high. The cost would depend on the number of approved requests, number and size of trees to be removed, and if council resolved to instruct the CEO to undertake planting or any other treatment as an offset.
Thank you. Question 3. City officers recommend retaining the 6 trees, noting they were planted as part of a strategic ecological plan, and have indicated that replacing them with low-level planting would offer fewer benefits. If councillors ignore this professional evidence-based advice and open the door to similar decisions that undermine the city's environmental efforts, how could this impact completed urban greening projects and the planning of future initiatives?
Thank you for the question. Ms Amprema?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A resolution on one specific matter would not result in the city removing other existing plantings.
Thank you, Ms Amprema, and thank you, Ms Poe, for the questions.
Thank you.
I'd now like to invite Ms Cecilia Brooke of South Perth. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors and city staff. I speak as a ratepayer of the City of South Perth. However, over the weekend I discovered there was a nationwide interest in the press over Councillor Coveney's notice of motion. I think this demonstrates how close to the heart this matter is to people and the value they put on our dwindling tree canopy. Personally, I feel very strongly that Councillor Coveney's motion would set a very strong precedent, as others have said in their deputations last week. I also live in a group of units and townhouses between Mill Point Road and Garden Street, with immediate views of Sir James Mitchell Park. I haven't counted the trees, but there would be 100 or more in front of my residence and to the side within our view. There were trees on Sir James Mitchell Park when we purchased our place over many years ago, but a lot more trees have been planted since then. But my husband and I have welcomed the aesthetic and the shade that this has provided to park users. My question, number 1, should Councillor Coveney's motion be approved, would it in effect provide the city an ad hoc basis to step outside the approved open space plans to remove trees at the request of property owners who believe the trees will at some time in the future or now impact their view?
Thank you for the question. Ms Amprema?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The city works within the adopted directions set by council in adopted strategies and plans. One decision in a specific circumstance does not negate the direction set by the adopted plans and strategies.
Thank you. Besides providing shade and amenity to Sir James Mitchell Park, will the planting in this area of the park also have some functional role in the groundwater control and soil stabilisation?
Thank you. Ms Amprema?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Trees provide habitat, shade for people and assist in managing groundwater. The plants around the lake edge strip nutrient from the water, improving water quality in the lake and subsequently into the river.
Thank you, Ms Amprema, and thank you, Ms Brooke, for the questions. I'd now like to invite Ms Christy Lowe of Como. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My question relates to the draft urban greening strategy, specifically the anticipated implementation plan. The city's report states, implementation plans will guide on-ground delivery with measurable targets and performance indicators to ensure accountability and track progress over time. Could the city please clarify what specific measurable targets and performance indicators will be included in the implementation plan?
Thank you for the question. Ms Amprema?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The city will commence developing the implementation plan if and when council adopts the strategy. The measures and targets have not been established yet as no work has commenced. However, the plan will be developed using the extensive stakeholder feedback from the community through the urban greening strategy stakeholder engagement.
Thank you. Given that the urban greening strategy lacks local context or analysis, can the city outline what analysis is planned for the implementation plan and confirm whether ecologically significant areas, such as the Collier area, where endangered black cockatoos forage and roost, will be identified and prioritised for protection and enhancement?
Thank you. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Noting the response to your previous question that my confirmation that the implementation plan hasn't been commenced yet, we haven't got a contents list. However, I would anticipate that some of the things that you've mentioned would be included in it because they did strongly feature in the stakeholder engagement, and the city is also aware that they're very important for our community going forward.
Excellent, thank you. Can the city confirm whether the implementation plan will be made available for public consultation? And if so, when is this expected to occur?
Thank you for the question. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As noted above, the implementation plan will be developed based on the extensive and relevant stakeholder feedback provided through the urban greening strategy development. The draft will be made available for public comment. As the strategy is not yet adopted, a consultant has not been engaged to develop the implementation plan, but it's intended that work will commence soon after the adoption of the strategy. Until a consultant is engaged and timelines are agreed with them for delivery, the city cannot confirm when the document will be available for public feedback.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo, and thank you, Ms Lowe, for the questions. I'd now like to invite Mr Michael Nind of Cloverdale. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mayor Milner, esteemed councillors, officials. My name is Michael Nind. You may hear that again. I'm here to talk about the urban greening strategy. To me, the urban greening strategy is a critical step in making the city of South Perth an environment that life can thrive into the future. Greener not just meaning cooler, but a lifeline for birds, animals, plants, and even humans. Question 1. More than 150 people took the time to participate in the Stage 3 consultation and would have likely had the reasonable expectation that their comments would elicit a response from the city will be taken into account in the strategy. Can the city provide the community and the council with a detailed breakdown of these comments and the city's responses?
Thank you for the question. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. All feedback comments are included in the Stage 3 Stakeholder Engagement Outcomes Report, which is also provided as an Attachment D in the OCM agenda and available on the city's website. The city has responded to these comments through appropriate revisions to the draft urban greening strategy. These include clarifying the content, simplifying the language used for the 4 pillars, adding performance measures for each pillar, and addressing concerns related to habitat for black cockatoos and other fauna. Some aspects of the feedback are relevant to the development of the implementation plan and will be considered during the drafting of that plan.
Thank you. Question 2. Given the urban greening strategy doesn't contain local context or analysis, can you please explain the analysis that's likely to be undertaken and provide for public consultation as part of the urban greening implementation plan? For example, will it contain analysis on tree planting opportunities and capacity on city street verges and in parks, neighbourhoods, hotspots, wildlife and pedestrian corridor gaps, ageing trees and tree health?
Thank you for the question. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And in a similar vein to my response to a previous question, the city will commence developing the implementation plan if and when council adopts the strategy. No work has commenced on the plan. However, the plan will be developed using the extensive stakeholder feedback from the community through the urban greening strategy stakeholder engagement. It will also include details of where there is capacity for further planting and also constraints on the planting.
Good. Question 3. As much of the Stage 3 community consultation feedback relates to the lack of clearer direction in the draft urban greening strategy in the city, has indicated that this will be provided in an urban greening implementation plan. including clear priorities, timelines, responsibilities and targets? When is it anticipated, if at all, that a draft of this critical plan will be available for ongoing community consultation?
Thank you for the question. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would just reiterate my response to the previous question on this subject. The implementation plan will be available to the public as the strategy is not yet adopted and the consultant has not been engaged to develop the implementation plan. It's intended that work will commence soon after adoption of the strategy. Until a consultant is engaged and timelines are agreed, the City cannot confirm when the document will be available for public feedback.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo, and
thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr Nine, for the questions. I apologise for mispronouncing your name earlier. Folks, that's just about 15 minutes, so I'm just going to use my powers under the standing orders to extend public question time for a further 15 minutes. If we need more time than that, I'll have to go to Council for another extension, but I can do it unilaterally at least the first time. I'd now like to invite Ms Theodora Papadimitos from Waterford. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
Good evening, councillors, fellow residents. It's Papadimitos. Mike, I'm here on behalf of the City of South Perth Tree Canopy Group, and my questions relate to agenda item 12.1 of Councillor Coveney's notice of motion to remove 6 trees on the South Perth foreshore. At a time when our canopy cover is flatlining and council are telling us that our public parks and spaces are where this will be addressed, the motion to remove trees is a decision between the best interests of the community versus a small minority adjacent residents that, if successful, will set a very troubling precedent. Question 1. Can the City explain how allowing tree removals and planting locations driven by ad hoc motions or individual preferences align with the objectives of the draft urban greening strategy, which aims to increase vegetation cover and protect existing green infrastructure?
Thank you for the question. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So it's a matter for Council to consider. The City's advice is contained within the officer's comment in the report.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo. Your second question?
Question 2. In the absence of clear criteria which perhaps could be set out in the urban greening strategy, how does the City intend to manage conflicting community preferences, such as when one resident wants a tree planted and another objects to it? Whose view takes precedence, and how will the City ensure consistency and fairness in these cases?
Thank you for the question. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The City seeks to balance varying community perspectives when managing public land for public good, whilst working within the relevant adopted strategies, plans and policies with respect to operational matters. Council has the responsibility for setting the direction through strategy and policy.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo. And your third question?
Third question, will the passing of this motion weaken the City's ability to implement long-term urban greening and biodiversity planning, particularly if future motions seek to override operational plans or redirect limited planting resources based on case-by-case community demands?
Thank you for the question. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The City will implement any resolution of Council on this matter as relating to the specific circumstance in this instance. The City will continue to work within the relevant adopted strategies and plans and policies relating to urban greening.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo, and thank you so much for those questions. I'd now like to invite Ms Georgina Wilson of Como, if you'd like to come to the microphone. Welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
I've come to a few of these meetings and I've lusted after these, so I'm going to grab a couple before I start. Good evening, everybody. My questions also relate to agenda item 12.1 about the removal of the young trees on the foreshore. When our vital canopy cover is not increasing or flatlining, as the previous lady said, and the council plans to address this by planting more trees in public places, such as parks and reserves, any motion to remove trees and going against the strategy is rather surprising. If the motion is carried, it will set a worrying precedent. So, question 1, can the City confirm whether the proposed rehabilitation of 135 square metres of vegetation near Lake Douglas, as referenced in Councillor Coveney's amended motion, offers any additional or enhanced environmental benefit to our city, given that it's understood that this type of rehabilitation is already undertaken annually as part of the city's normal operational works program.
Thank you for the question. Ms Empremo, I feel like I'm picking on you tonight, but it's not deliberate. Can I send that one your way?
That's all right, Mr Mayor, broad shoulders. In addition to if the additional budget is approved in the mid-year budget review, the 135 square metres will be in addition to any other planting programmes the city undertakes.
Okay. Number 2, can the city provide an assessment of the comparative environmental and community values of the 6 trees proposed for removal versus the proposed planting of low-level vegetation of the area around Lake Douglas?
Thank you. Ms Empremo?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Low-level planting supports increased biodiversity, creates habitat and supports cooling of the local area. Trees also provide shade for people. The city has not undertaken any quantified benefit of one versus the other. The 135 square metres of low-level planting is the equivalent area of estimated mature canopy from the trees that are proposed to be removed.
Thank you. And third and final, can the city tell me whether the proposed additional rehabilitation or revegetation of the area at a quoted cost of $30,000 is within the city's current resource capacity, or will this motion result in reallocation of staff time and resources away from other planned or potential planting sites?
Thank you. Ms Empremo?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The notice of motion includes for consideration of additional budget allocation in the mid-year budget review, which, if approved by council, would be in addition to the existing operational budget, and the majority of that work would be undertaken by contractors.
Thank you, Ms Empremo, and thank you, Ms Wilson, for the questions. I'd now like to invite Ms Bronwyn David of South Perth, if you'd like to come to the microphone. Welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good evening, councillors and city staff. My question is in relation to item 12.1, Councillor Coveney's notice of motion to remove 6 trees on the South Perth foreshore. There has been much media attention on the proposed tree removal over the last week. To sum up the reactions to that media, the vast majority of people I have heard from express incredulity that in a warming, drying climate and in the presence of the shot hole borer, anyone would contemplate removing already planted trees, especially where there is clear evidence from research undertaken on behalf of the city that the majority of residents would prefer more trees over the preservation of the views of a few. My first question is that ABC Perth published an article on Instagram on Friday about the 6 saplings. By Saturday, the post had over 200 comments. At that time, 3 comments supported the removal of the trees. Most comments railed against the idea of removing the trees. Has the council or city considered the reputational risk to which it may be subject if Councillor Coveney's motion is passed?
Thank you for the question. Ms Empremo?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So notices of motion are provided by an elected member, and where the city suggests a more appropriate recommendation, it will provide a suggested officer recommendation that council can resolve during the item, and the officer comment in the report also includes a section on risk.
Thank you. My next question relates to a question previously asked. Can the city explain what methodology or framework the city uses to determine whether the removal of established trees can be reasonably offset by landscape works that do not result in a net gain in tree canopy, tree habitat or tree biodiversity?
Thank you for the question. Ms Empremo?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to refer to the previous response that I gave on this matter, that low-level planting supports increased biodiversity, creates habitat and supports cooling of the area. Trees also provide shade for people. The city's not undertaken any quantified benefit of one versus the other, and the 135 square metres of low-level planting is the equivalent area of estimated mature canopy of the trees that are proposed to be removed.
Thank you. In the minutes of the June 2025 council meeting, referencing the previous council decision in July 2024 to allow residents to request not to have a verge tree that was to be planted as a result of a greening grant, or to request that one already planted be removed within 14 days, it was noted that the internal and external costs associated with managing and responding to requests was estimated at $25,000. I imagine there have been costs incurred already by the city in responding to Councillor Cavani's motion that would not have been expended without the motion and resultant reactions, such as time needed to respond to media inquiries. And if it were to be passed, the city would need to devote time and effort to respond to other requests from residents to remove or relocate vegetation, or residents specifying what vegetation should go where. In that event, can the city tell me where the budget for those responses would be taken from, and would it be funds otherwise used for greening activities?
Thank you for the question. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The resources to respond to any such queries would come from officer time, which is within existing salary allocation included in the annual operational budget allocation. Any material impact on other work would depend on the number and nature of requests.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo, and thank you, Ms David, for the questions. I'd now like to invite Ms Kathy Lees of South Perth. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mayor. So my question is, or questions are in relation to the urban greening strategy, 10.3.1. So the content and quality of the city's urban greening strategy is critical to our community, given that it is a 25-year document and our valuable green spaces face more and more challenges now than ever. Targets and measurables are critical in strategies because they provide clarity, direction and accountability for stakeholders, in this case, the community. They ensure that goals are specific and achievable, allowing for progress tracking and performance evaluation, ultimately leading to more effective strategy implementation and improved outcomes. So my questions are in relation to the absence of targets and measurables in the draft strategy. So the first question is, can the city please explain how it has responded to the Community Deliberative Panel's 7th highest priority out of more than 15, and I think there were at least 27 that 80% of the panel agreed on. That priority, the 7th priority, was to include targets and other measurables in the strategy, with the panel stating that while no greening initiative will be flawless, it is critical to measure progress and to learn from any mistakes to continuously improve, particularly in the case of a 25-year strategy.
Thank you for the question. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The urban greening strategy includes performance measures with the targets to be included in the implementation plan. The priorities identified by the deliberative panel were incorporated into the Josh Byrne and Associates draft urban greening strategy and informed the performance measures in the draft strategy being presented to Council tonight. The panel priorities and broader community feedback will also help shape the targets in the implementation plan.
Okay. Question 2. Can the city confirm how many of the more than 150 participants in the Stage 3 consultation asked for targets and measurables to be included in the urban greening strategy?
Thank you for the question. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The total number of participants in the Stage 3 engagement that asked for targets and measurables to be included in the urban greening strategy is 42 out of the 153, which is 27%, noting that some of the responses did talk about measures targets to be included in the implementation plan.
So question 3, given that the deliberative panel and many stage 3 community consultation participants called for measurable targets in the urban greening strategy rather than the implementation plan as you're referring to, and they have not been included, and given that at least 20 of Perth's local government authorities have canopy targets in their urban greening or urban forest strategies, including all of our neighbours, so that would be Victoria Park, Canning and Melville, can the city confirm for the community that it will do the required analysis as part of the development of the draft urban greening implementation plan, because that's clearly not been done yet, and include a canopy cover target in that plan? Or is the city going to fail to meet community expectations and industry standards?
Thank you for the question. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A range of targets will be contained within the implementation plan, identifying actions and how much they would contribute to increasing canopy at maturity.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo, and thank you, Ms Lees, for the questions. I'd now like to invite Ms Heidi Schmidt of South Perth. If you'd like, just before I am inviting you, Ms Schmidt, but I do need, no, please sit down. You're very welcome. I just need to extend public question time for another 15 minutes. Councillors, I'll move a motion that we extend for 15 minutes. Councillor Coveney's seconding that. I think we can probably do it by a show of hands. All in favour of extending public question time for another 15 minutes? That was unanimous. Thank you so much. Sorry for the interruption, Ms Schmidt.
Thank you.
But welcome, and we look forward to your questions.
I've reduced some of my questions because parts have already been answered. I've been a ratepayer in the City of South Perth for 34 years and have watched many councillors come and go over that time. Trees have always been a hot topic in the community, with the vast majority of the community in support of more trees, not less, for 34 years. Question 1. How does the City intend to manage future expectations if this motion passes, particularly?
It does it to me too.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why.
If other residents begin to expect that ratepayer-funded and environmentally sound projects can be undone post-implementation based solely on private aesthetic concerns.
Thank you for the question. Ms Ampremo. Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So the City will implement any resolution of Council on this matter tonight as it relates to the specific circumstances in this instance. And the City will continue beyond that to work within the relevant adopted strategies, plans and policies that relate to urban greening.
Thank you. Question 2, can the City please clarify the legal and governance basis for using public funds contributed by all City of South Perth ratepayers to remove existing trees and potentially fund a $30,000 new project solely to satisfy the personal preferences of a very small number of residents, particularly when the existing plantings were part of an endorsed Node 7 strategy?
Thank you for the question. Ms Ampremo.
So the legislation provides the overarching framework that allows Council to allocate resources, including funding, and financial resources allocated to the subject to the budget approval by Council. Council approves that budget allocation through resolution adopted by the majority, absolute majority of Council.
Thank you. Question 3. Please explain how our council can justify the potential waste of ratepayer funds, both in removing already established trees and in proposing an uncosted, last-minute, amended project when these existing trees serve broader ecological, aesthetic and community value and pose no substantial obstruction to views as confirmed by the City's own photographic evidence, with only one tree likely to grow beyond 8 metres in its lifetime. That is a marri that will take at least 25 years to grow to a likely height of 30 metres and will be a food source for the endangered black cockatoos.
Thank you for the question. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is a matter for Council to consider during the deliberations of the item.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo. And thank you, Ms Schmidt, for the questions.
Could I just conclude?
I have to be fair to everyone. It's only for questions. I'm sorry. I'd now like to invite Ms Catherine Brady of Kensington, if you'd like to come to the microphone. Welcome to you. Oh, okay. In that case, I'll invite Mr Lou Di Virgilio. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. Welcome to you. Welcome to the microphone, and we look forward to your questions.
Good evening, Lord Mayor, councillors. Thank you for your time. My questions are relating to 12.1 for 6 tree removals. Question 1. There is a large number of 40-odd trees around nearby Lake Douglas that are well established. So why has there been additional 6 trees planted between our homes and Lake Douglas?
Thank you for the question. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The 6 trees have been planted to develop and enhance existing parkland flora and fauna. The city plans to protect and enhance existing vegetation, improve water quality, and to develop and maintain sustainable habitats for fauna and provide shade for users of the park.
Question 2. The council has an obligation to the community and residences. Was there any advertising, consultation, communication with the community and residences advising of the council's planting of these trees in this location?
Thank you for the question. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The city undertook significant community consultation when developing the South Perth Foreshore management plan and strategy. Enhancing and encouraging the flora and fauna is a strategy for this node in the plan.
Question 3. Who has decided on behalf of the council members where these trees are to be planted?
Thank you for the question. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The city's operational staff on the ground determined the exact location, and they planted the trees in line with the boundary between each dwelling to reduce the impact on views from the dwellings.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo, and thank you very much for the questions. Now, I'm just going to check with governance to see if there was any late questions received in the tray. No, there's not. Okay. In that case, I now close public question time at 6:51 p.m. We move on to item 7, which is confirmation of minutes and notes. Item 7.1 is minutes. Item 7.1.1 is the ordinary council meeting held on 24 June 2025. So I'm about to look for a mover and a seconder to move a motion that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on 24 June 2025 be taken as read and as confirmed as a true and correct record. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Coveney moving. Oh, a question, Councillor Brenda Radis?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I've just got a couple of questions just with regard to the minutes. The item with regard to the nocturnal food and beverage village, I was just wondering if we'd be including the amount for the fees and charges with regard to that item.
Who should I direct that one to, folks? Ms Shaw?
Sorry, Mr Mayor, so you were seeking whether or not the fees and charges would be included or as part of the agreement?
Yes, would be included in the minutes.
No, it was confidential, I believe. That would be a matter that would be provided to the applicant when we negotiate that agreement.
Okay, and just with reference to the tenders that we actually undertake, successful tenders, we actually include the value of the tender in the minutes.
Sorry, that's a matter for Ms Ampremo.
Ms Ampremo?
Yeah, that's correct. We do include the dollar value in tenders.
So my question is, for this item, based on the premise that we do it for tenders, would it not be appropriate to include the fees and charges for this item as well?
Ms Ampremo or Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll take the question on notice. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Brenda Radis?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you very much, Director Shaw. Just another question. The budget was not provided in the in the agenda briefing, but it was just brought in at the ordinary council meeting. So does that item become a new item that is brought to council, or with regard to the minutes?
Who should I send that to, folks?
New business, is it not? Because it wasn't actually brought to council in the agenda briefing, it was only brought in the ordinary council meeting. Yeah.
Through the chair, could I suggest we take that question on notice and we'll provide a response so we can get some clarity in regards to what actually occurred?
Thank you, Mr. CEO.
All right. So, subject to the two items that have been taken on notice, Councillor Coveney, still happy to move that motion. Could I have a seconder? Councillor Brenda Abrandis, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose? No. Okay, then I'll simply declare that carried unanimously. Moving on to item 7.2, notes of briefing. I'm about to call for a mover and a seconder that council notes the following council briefings and workshops were held. 7.2.1, concept briefings and workshops, and 7.2.2, council agenda briefing dated 15 July 2025. I think Councillor Brenda Abrandis was first there, seconded by Councillor Coveney. Folks, does anyone oppose? No? Okay, then I'll declare that carried unanimously. On to item 8, which is presentations. Item 8.1 is petitions. That's nil for this evening. Item 8.2 is gifts or awards presented to council. Nil for this evening. And item 8.3 is deputations. Deputations were heard at the council agenda briefing held on 15 July 2025. That brings us to item 9, which is method of dealing with agenda business. I'll now seek confirmation from the Acting Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Matthew Scott, that all the report items contained in tonight's agenda were discussed at the July Council agenda briefing. Mr. Scott.
Yes, I can confirm they were discussed. That being said, there was some slight changes to some of the recommendations that will be considered tonight.
All right, thank you. So, with the exception of those items to be withdrawn for discussion tonight, reports will be adopted by exception resolution, and by that I mean the officer recommendation will be adopted as is without discussion or amendment. The following items have been withdrawn for discussion this evening. Item 10.1.1, entitled RFT 1 of 2025, provision of Coode Street new public toilets and changing places building. The reason for that is an absolute majority is required. And item 10.4.3, entitled Asset Management Strategy. The reason for that is Councillor Nick Coveney has an amendment. Councillors, does anyone wish to withdraw any other items for discussion this evening? That's Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Apologies, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 12.1.
Oh, 12.1 and 12.2 will be considered. Yeah, yep. No, it's only the ones that fall onto item 10. Yep. So no items to be withdrawn, councillors? No? Okay. In that case, I'm about to call for a mover and a seconder to carry the following item. Oh, Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Apologies, Mr. Mayor. Just a question with regard to the changes in the officer's recommendations. Could we please be advised which agenda items they are, and will those automatically be removed because there's been a change in the officer's recommendation from the agenda briefing?
Mr. Scott, I'm aware that there was a change to the officer report on item 12.1. I don't think it was a change in the officer recommendation.
No, I don't believe there was any changes to items 10, items in section 10. They were only in section 12 motions on notice.
All right. So just to start again from the top, I'm about to call for a mover and a seconder to carry the following items by exception resolution. Those items are item 10.3.1, urban greening strategy, item 10.3.2, E-quote 7 of 2025, provision of traffic management services, item 10.4.1. Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Apologies, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to withdraw 10.3.1.
All right, let me reorder my notes.
Thank you.
You're just seeing if I'm paying attention, aren't you? All right, starting again. I'm about to call for a mover and a seconder to carry the following items by exception resolution. Item 10.3.2, E-quote 7 of 2025, provision of traffic management services. Item 10.4.1, listing of payments, June 2025. Item 10.4.2, monthly financial statements, June 2025, interim. Councillor Coveney is moving. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Brenda Abrandis, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose those items? That's a no. Okay. So, those items have just been passed by exception resolution in accordance with clause 5.5 of the City of South Perth Standing Orders Local Law 2007, and the officer's recommendations have been accepted by council. We'll now be moving on to those reports identified to be withdrawn for discussion, the first of which is item 10.1.1, entitled RFT 1 of 2025, provision of Coode Street, new public toilets and changing places building. There's an officer recommendation before us. I haven't received any amended motions or alternative motions. An absolute majority is required. Would someone like to move the officer recommendation? Councillor Coveney, thank you. Would someone like to second the officer recommendation? Councillor Waugh, thank you. Councillors, before we get into debate, I'm going to ask if anyone actually opposes this item. That's a no. Okay, then I use my powers under the standing orders to declare it carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We now move on to item 10.3.1, entitled Urban Greening. There is an officer recommendation before us. I haven't received any amended or alternative motions. Would somebody like to move the officer recommendation? Councillor Coveney, thank you. Someone to second? Councillor Waugh, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose this? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to actually adjourn this item under the standing orders. Okay, so that would be a procedural motion under the standing orders. Councillors, and for the benefit of the gallery, where someone raises a procedural motion, they're entitled to give their reasons as to why they're moving, in this case, an adjournment of this item, which means that we cease discussion on this item right now and we come back, is it the next council meeting, folks, or next council meeting, and then pick it up as though we were continuing tonight's discussion now. I'm just writing down who moved and seconded it so I don't forget. After the person moving the adjournment has given their reasons, there's no further debate. I'll now see if someone wants to second Councillor Brenda Abrandis's procedural motion for an adjournment of this item, and if there is a seconder for Councillor Brenda Abrandis's motion for an adjournment, then I'll give Councillor Brenda Abrandis the opportunity to give his reasons. But after that, there is no debate and we will have to have a vote as to whether or not this item is adjourned. So with that, would someone like to second Councillor Brenda Abrandis's procedural motion? Councillor Navard, thank you. Councillor Brenda Abrandis, the floor is yours to give your reasons as to why this motion should be adjourned. Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Navard. The reasons for the adjournment of this item is the urban greening strategy is a very important strategy that we need to make a decision on tonight. We've heard from a lot of the community members with regard to their concerns about the strategy not achieving the targets. This evening before us tonight, we've also got an amendment with regard to Councillor Coveney's motion, which looks at considering a workshop to develop a policy for planting trees on public open land for January 2026. This should be included as part of the overall strategy with regard to Councillor Coveney's motion as well for January 2026. The urban greening strategy contains no targets, and the establishing of targets is required for the greater attention to ensure that we have priorities in providing direction and a greater likelihood of achievement. The community have raised concern with regard to targets, and we need to defer this item to ensure that we give it due time and consideration and take into account some of those initiatives that were actually raised as priorities as part of the urban greening strategic collaboration process. And this includes things like monitoring, assessing, maintaining and improving vegetation and tree health, tracking canopy cover, trees planted and success rates and implementing tree replacement strategies and programs. These are all items that are actually in the strategy before us tonight. And these priorities cannot be achieved without establishing measurable targets. Failing to establish targets diminishes the emphasis required to be achieved. The urban greening strategy priority approaches were identified where there was at least 80% panel members supporting some of the initiatives. And some of those really important initiatives that have been included in this report include things such as prioritising funding for the urban greening, maximising community involvement, collaboration, conserving green zones, creating linkages to ensure habitat for wildlife, increase canopy and understory planting, create shaded connection for people using active transport, staggering tree replacement and appropriate diverse climate and disease resilient species into planting and maintenance. These are really important initiatives that have been raised by the community and should be taken into consideration. Without targets, we're unable to measure the urban greening strategy performance, and this item does need to be deferred to give it due care and consideration, and to ensure that the critical priorities are included and the accountabilities have been defined. The community has gone through an extensive consultation process, and for this reason tonight, members, I'd actually like to adjourn this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Brandis. Now, councillors, as said before, now that the mover of the procedural motion has spoken, there's no debate. We simply go to the vote as to whether or not this item should be adjourned. So, councillors, please cast your votes. All right, so the results are in. The motion for an adjournment has failed. Those in favour were Councillor Brenda Brandis, Councillor Navard and Councillor Waugh. Those against were Councillor Coveney, Councillor D'Souza, Councillor Prendeville and myself, so 3-4. We now go back to the officer recommendation. I think, yes, someone has opposed, so we'll conduct it in the ordinary motion. Councillor Coveney, you were the mover. If you'd like to speak, you have the opportunity now.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll speak very briefly. The urban greening strategy has been developed through an external facilitator for stakeholder engagement and an external consultant to draft the strategy document. There are strong views on both sides, and the City went to great lengths to use a process that represented a whole of community balanced perspective. The urban greening strategy represents a compromised position, as will always be the case when balancing opposing views. The consultant in drafting the strategy and the City in updating it following stage 3 of the engagement process went to great lengths to ensure the intent and agreed wording of the panel was not lost. In relation to locational specific criteria, the strategy approach is whole of City. Whilst the panel did consider the City based on geographic areas and functions, this was brought up to a higher strategic level. The City also already has locational specific documents which remain valid if the urban greening strategy is adopted. In relation to greening versus views, whilst there was support for urban greening across the whole of the City, there was not unilateral support for greening with no regard to views. In relation to the lack of specific targets, previous strategies included well-intended actions and targets, but they had a significant financial cost which was not quantified, and which the Council was not in a position to endorse or to commit to. This meant the target was of little value and set the City up to fail. This strategy is a high-level document intended to be a longer-term citywide direction-setting document. It is the implementation plan that looks at how the strategic direction will be delivered in the short term. The implementation plan assists the City in preparing the draft annual budget and gives Council a mechanism to endorse specific projects that align with the strategic direction. I commend the administration for the amount of work and effort which has gone into putting together the urban greening strategy, and I encourage all councillors to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Councillor Waugh, would you like to speak as seconder?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm supporting this strategy this evening, whilst I also want to acknowledge the strength of the community sentiment and the very valid concerns that have been raised in recent days and throughout the consultation process. So first and foremost, I wanted to thank all of the residents and community groups and stakeholders who have taken the time to provide that feedback across all three stages of the consultation. The level of engagement we've seen does reflect how deeply people care about our urban environment and the future livability of our city. The strategy, while high level in nature, is an important starting point. It articulates a clear intent to increase our tree canopy, protect biodiversity and build resilience against the challenges of a warming climate. It provides a framework that aligns with other planning and environmental priorities and commits to the development of a more detailed urban greening implementation plan. However, I do share some of the concerns that have been expressed. Many of the residents expected more from this document. They expected clear targets like canopy cover goal. They expected defined timelines, spatial mapping and strong commitments to preserving and expanding green space. And perhaps more importantly, they expected their feedback to be more clearly reflected and responded to in the version that's before us tonight. And in my view, those expectations are not unreasonable. We have seen repeated calls for measurable outcomes, and I agree that the strategy would be stronger and more meaningful if it did include specific time-bound targets to guide and evaluate the progress. That said, I also recognise the strategy was never intended to answer every operational or technical question. That is the role of the implementation plan, which is of much more detail, prioritisation, mapping and monitoring should sit. So it is my strong view that the implementation plan must be subject to community consultation before it is finalised, and given the concerns that have been raised, particularly around transparency, accountability and ambition, I think it would be a misstep to move ahead with the next phase without involving the community once again. I would like to see a plan that includes neighbourhood level canopy data and urban heat analysis, targets for planting and retention across both public and private land, stronger protections against tree loss through development, clear mechanisms to support biodiversity, wildlife corridors and habitats for species like Carnaby cockatoo, and meaningful education and engagement for landowners and developers alike. To be effective, this work must also address the tensions that continue to arise between greening and views, between planting and maintenance, between community-wide benefits and individual expectations. We need policy clarity in these areas, and I do hope the implementation plan will provide it. So in closing, I want to acknowledge that the strategy may not yet go far enough, but I do believe it gets us moving in the right direction, and my support tonight is given with a firm expectation that the next stage, being the implementation plan, will be robust, consultative and ambitious. Because I do think that we owe that to our environment, to our children, and to every person who has taken the time to write to us and advocate for a greener future and to hold us to account. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waugh. Councillors, does anyone wish to speak against the officer recommendation? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So unfortunately this evening I am speaking against this item because it doesn't go far enough. It doesn't provide the targets that we need to outline to achieve. It doesn't provide that real focus that the community have obviously been consulted on and raised through these workshops. We have other documents that provide strategic initiatives and include targets. So, for example, the asset management strategy before us tonight has targets. CEO's performance, even the budget and the long-term financial plan, they have financial targets with narrative as to what we are meant to be achieving. We need to ensure that we establish these targets so that we strive for focused outcomes. And we need to ensure that there's accountability to deliver within the parameters. Councillor Waugh touched on some specific initiatives which are highly appropriate and should be considered as part of the initiatives for consideration for including targets with regard to this strategy. The urban forest strategy has not supported, so that's the forest strategy, not the current strategy we're working on. The urban forest strategy has not supported any significant increase in the urban canopy cover over about the last 9 years. And whilst canopy cover is only one metric that is critical to address the heating environment, there are many other metrics that need to be considered, including habitat, roosting locations, breeding hollows, nature corridors, hydrology management on our foreshore, and also a balance between endemic and non-endemic species. Having a reflection on the strategic outcomes of our neighbours, in particular the town of Victoria Park, they articulated quite a few targets with respect to what they were trying to achieve. And they made sure that their targets were measurable, realistic, and covered quite a few facets of the greening requirements. Now, as I said, the community have actually been heavily engaged in this process, and this is not the first time we've actually seen the community being very supportive of urban greening and also tree retention within the city. We saw it last year with regard to the retention of the trees in Karrawara, the olive trees, and we also saw the concern raised with regard to the proposal that was successful in preventing trees being planted in Signia Cove, where the ratepayer or their adjacent ratepayers could actually prevent the planting of a tree. Now, the community have raised a lot of concerns, and we've actually seen overwhelming support previously with regard to trees and protection of trees and enhancement. So, for example, the community feedback we received with regard to tree protection was exceedingly supportive with regard to the local planning policy that was presented back in June 2024. So 70.3% of support was received from respondents. And again, with regard to the local planning scheme 7, we've actually seen the community being incredibly supportive with regard to tree protection, in particular on private property. And we saw 78.9% support from respondents in November 2022. So for these reasons tonight, I appreciate how much effort has been put into this strategy, and I probably call it more of a framework. I appreciate the amount of work that's been put into it. I attended one of the working sessions with the group earlier this year, as did I think maybe a couple of my councillors, and we saw the amount of effort they put in, we saw the passion, and we saw a lot of people very concerned about targets. So this strategy does disappoint me a lot tonight, that we don't have any targets.
Councillor Brenda Abrandis, I'm sorry, that's 5 minutes. I'm happy to move a motion that you be granted a further 5 minutes. Would someone, Councillor Coveney, thank you. Councillors, please cast your votes on a motion that Councillor Brenda Abrandis be granted a further 5 minutes to speak. Waiting on one more vote, I think. Hopefully it's not me. No, that's it. So unanimous. Sorry for the interruption. Councillor Brenda Abrandis, please continue.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was actually in wrapping up. Look, so in summary, a lot of good work has been done, and the administration do need to work very closely in trying to identify targets, and maybe that 80% hurdle is not achievable with regard to each target, and I don't want that to be the benchmark, because I think 80% may very well be inappropriate, you know, if we could get 70%. And I think we need to also reflect on what our peers are doing, and it's not necessarily saying that we need to actually accept the state's mandate of 30%. If we look at the town of Victoria Park again, they've chosen a reasonable target within a reasonable period that is quite achievable for them, that they consider it to be achievable. So for this reason tonight, I'm not very supportive of the urban greening strategy as it stands, and won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to speak in favour of the officer recommendation? Is there anyone who would like to speak against the officer recommendation? There being no further debate, Councillor Coveney, if you'd like to wind up, you have 5 minutes to rebut any arguments made against during debate.
I'm good, thank you, Mr Mayor.
All right. In that case, I'll put the item to the vote. So, councillors, we're voting on the officer recommendation on item 10.3.1, Urban Greening Strategy. Please cast your votes. And the votes are in. Those who voted in favour of the officer recommendation were Councillor Coveney, Councillor D'Souza, myself, Councillor Navard, Councillor Prendeville and Councillor Waugh. Those against were Councillor Brenda Brandis, so 6-1. Okay, we now move on to the next item to be withdrawn for discussion this evening, which is item 10.4.3, Asset Management Strategy. We do have an amendment from Councillor Coveney on this one. Councillor Coveney, did you want to lead with your amendment and move that at this stage?
Yes, please, Mr Mayor.
All right. If you could read your amendment. So hold on. Let me just catch up with my notes here. Yes, if you can read out your amendment and perhaps give us the heads up as to what part of your amendment is different from the officer recommendation.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. So the officer recommendation concludes at the first attachment A. So it reads that Council adopts the draft asset management strategy 2025 to 2035 as contained within attachment A. And then my new bit is as follows. Subject to the following amendments on page 13 of the strategy under the heading Supply and Access, subheading Strategic Priorities, page 49 of 96 of attachment A. And there's two amendments. Number one is to amend dot point 2 to include the words and investment in between the words investigating and the provision. And the second amendment is to amend dot point 4 to include the words including a regional playground between the words spaces and that.
Thank you. Would anyone like to second Councillor Coveney's amendment? Councillor D'Souza. Councillor Coveney, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So with my first change, it would make the sentence read as follows. Investigating and investment in the provision and or development of indoor multi-sports courts and outdoor recreational spaces. The reason for this amendment is because the city doesn't have indoor sports courts, and indoor sports courts are a key recommendation in our Community Recreation Facilities Plan of 2019 to 23. Council's support for indoor sports courts has been made very clear in prior notices of motion, like the Mayor's, and also in workshops. The administration has also signalled support. While we seek external funding, the city ought to be prepared to make some sort of contribution itself towards the development, as distinct from just investigating it, as the strategy would read without my proposed amendment. The second amendment would make the sentence read as follows. Investment in larger play spaces, including a regional playground, that service high demand above small play spaces with lower usage. And the reason for my amendment is the city doesn't have a regional playground. A new major regional playground at Coode Street Foreshore is a high priority in the Play Spaces Plan of 2022. I think it's actually the highest priority in that plan. And council support for a regional playground has been made clear in workshops, and the administration has also signalled support and is working on concept plans with the aim of obtaining funding from external agencies to co-fund the project. Now, I've raised both these proposed changes with the administration, who I understand have got no difficulty with either of them. And I just wanted to make a couple of other points which I say are relevant to this amendment and amendments generally, being that there was a suggestion by a deputy last week that amendments to notices of motion are brought without consultation or conferral with the administration. Let me assure you that isn't the case. Speaking for myself, I always engage with the administration, ask questions, share views, brainstorm like I'm sure every other councillor does. Just because you might not see it doesn't mean it doesn't happen, and just because you might not personally agree with it doesn't mean it's not strategic. And it might surprise some residents to learn that much of what you see for the first time in the agenda each month, we're also seeing for the first time each month, particularly the detail. Like you, we've got a few days to review it and consider it, whilst balancing our full-time jobs and family commitments. So, look, I flagged the amendments in this motion for discussion with the administration less than 24 hours after I received it in the agenda, so I certainly wasn't tardy. There was also a suggestion last week from one of the deputies that it's somehow bad if councillors disagree. Respectfully, we agree on a lot, if not most things, but disagreements do arise from time to time on particular issues, and that is healthy in a normal democracy. I'd be more concerned if us councillors voted the same on everything, if we didn't scrutinise policy and if we weren't always looking for ways to try and make our city better.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Councillor D'Souza, you're the seconder. Would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Very briefly, look, Council has for some time been quite united in its support of sports courts, so it's a sensible addition. Furthermore, from the perspective of having this in this particular plan, I think it's wise to put certain guardrails around planning for sports courts. So having it in our asset management plan will create more certainty for staff in sort of integrating potential future facilities with future asset liabilities as they come onto our books. So I'm supportive of this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor D'Souza. Councillors, would anyone like to speak against the amendment? No? Would anyone else like to speak in favour? No? I guess I'll ask one very simple question to Ms Amprimo. Is there anything in the amendment that would give the administration concern or create any problems?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No, I've got no concerns about the amendment.
All right. Last chance for anyone to speak either for or against? No? Doesn't seem like anyone's opposed. So, Councillor Coveney, no reason to wind up. I'll simply put the amended motion to the vote. Councillors, please cast your votes. And I'll just let governance know that we haven't got our... Oh, there we go. There's our voting buttons. Great. And that was unanimous. Thank you all. Okay. And that brings us to item 11, applications for a leave of absence. Councillors, does anyone have a leave of absence application that they'd like to make this evening? Councillor Prendeville.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to apply for a leave of absence from the 16th of August until the 20th of August inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Hayley Prendeville for the period of 16 August 2025 to 20 August 2025 inclusive. Anyone else? All right. I'll pop one in as well, but I'll call in a moment for someone to move a motion that a leave of absence application received from Councillor Hayley Prendeville for the period of 16 August 2025 to 20 August 2025 inclusive, and me, Mayor Greg Milner, for the period of 24 July 2025 to 17 October 2025. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Coveney, thank you. Someone a second. Councillor Brenda Brandis, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose? No. Okay. All right. We now move on to item 12, which is motions of which previous notice has been given. Item 12.1 is a notice of motion from Councillor Nick Coveney entitled Removal of the 6 trees planted on the south side of Lake Douglas during winter 2024. Councillor Coveney has an amended an amended version of that motion, but I also understand that Councillor Navard has signalled that she would like to move a deferral. And councillors, this puts me in a little bit of an awkward spot because our standing orders are not clear as in these circumstances as to who I should allow to go first. Councillor Coveney has indicated that he wants to move a notice of motion, but if the motion is going to be deferred, then Councillor Navard would need to defer that motion before it's been moved and seconded. So, bear with me, and please jump in, Ms Fry, or anyone else from the governance team if I get this wrong. If the motion were to be deferred, Councillor Navard would need to move that deferral motion. It would need to be seconded. Councillor Navard would give her reasons, then we would vote on it. And if that was carried, Councillor Coveney would never get the chance to move item 12.1 up front. So if I give Councillor Navard first billing, then Councillor Coveney wouldn't get to move his motion at all. If I let Councillor Coveney go first and his motion is moved and then seconded, the first chance Councillor Navard would get to defer, in effect, or in this case adjourn, the motion would be via a procedural motion similar to what was proposed earlier tonight. So I've spoken with the governance team about what I'm supposed to do in this situation. We've decided to follow precedent, which is the person who is first in time gets first bite at the cherry, so to speak. But before I do that, I will ask Councillor Coveney if he has any objection to Councillor Navard moving a deferral of his motion before he gets a chance to move it.
I have no objection to her moving the deferral. I object to it, but I have no objection to her moving it first.
All right. So I'm about to give Councillor Navard the chance to move her deferral. Once she's done that, there will be a seconder. A deferral is not a procedural motion. So that means that we can have people speaking, the mover giving their reason, if there's a seconder, the second giving their reasons, and we can have a normal debate back and forth as though it were a regular item on the agenda. So people will be able to say if they do or if they don't support a deferral, and then we will have a vote on the deferral itself. So I'm going to do my best to make sure that nobody gets lost here, because these things are great fun and our standing orders are just peachy when it comes to this sort of stuff. But I'm about to ask Councillor Navard if she would like to move her deferral motion. Then, if the answer is yes, and she moves it, I will then see about a seconder for Councillor Navard's deferral motion, and then we will have a debate in the usual course and a vote on the deferral motion. If it's deferred, obviously we won't come back to item 12.1 tonight, but if it is not carried, then we will proceed to Councillor Coveney moving item 12.1. Hopefully that's clear to everyone. Councillor Navard, the floor is yours if you'd like to move your deferral motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Coveney, for being supportive of the change. Yes, I would like to defer this motion, that item 12.1, notice of motion, Councillor Nick Coveney, removal of the 6 trees planted on the south side of Lake Douglas during winter 2024 be deferred, and Council requests the Chief Executive Officer to schedule a workshop so that the elected members may consider a consistent decision-making path for addressing requests for tree removal from public land, with the matter returning to the ordinary council meeting to be held on Monday, the 23rd of September 2025 for councillors' consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. I'm going to give everyone 60 seconds to just read what's on the screen there, because we should all know what we're voting on. Now, I'll just check in with governance. Can a deferral motion ask for a workshop? Is that okay? All right, great. All right, hopefully that's enough time for everyone. I'm going to ask if someone would like to second Councillor Navard's motion for a deferral. Gone. The motion for a deferral has lapsed for want of a seconder. That means we return to the substantive item on item 12.1. Councillor Coveney, I don't think you need to read out the motion itself because it's in the agenda, but just confirming that you would like to move... Oh, no, you've got an amended version, don't you? Perhaps if you can read out the new version of the motion, and then I'll see about a seconder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for explaining that process before. That would have been very difficult, so that was very clear.
Thank you.
So my motion, or my amended motion, reads as follows. The council requests the CEO to 1. Remove the 6 juvenile trees planted on the south side of Lake Douglas during winter 2024. 2. Investigate an appropriate location within the vicinity of Lake Douglas to plant approximately 135 square metres of low-level planting, not higher than 2 metres at maturity, as a comparative replacement for the removed tree canopy cover at maturity on the south side of Lake Douglas. 3, include the adjustment of an additional $30,000 expenditure within the operational budget in the mid-year budget review to cover the cost associated with the removal of the trees and preparation and planting of the low-level replacement planting. And 4, this is principally the new bit, no earlier than 1 January 2026, host a councillor workshop to develop a policy on planting trees on public land.
All right, thank you, Councillor Coveney. Councillors, would anyone like to second Councillor Coveney's motion? Councillor Waugh? Councillor Coveney, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I wish to place on the record that I firmly believe there are many benefits to trees and that I agree the city should plant more trees, including on the foreshore. In fact, at a workshop held just a few weeks ago, I was the only councillor suggesting more trees were needed at particular parts of the foreshore. Just last month, I supported this council's allocation of more than $2.5 million to urban greening related initiatives on the foreshore, $1 million towards the Coode Street Riverbank restoration, almost $500,000 towards the Hurlingham living stream, and $1.1 million towards upgraded irrigation. This motion is more nuanced than trees on the foreshore. It's about the placement of those trees. The trees versus views debate has long been an issue of contention. That debate has not yet been resolved, putting councillors in the rather unpleasant middle of competing interests. On one side of this debate, we have residents who have paid a premium for their views, and the very real prospect that their amenity and the value of their properties will decline if that view is obstructed. What these residents are asking for is consistency, to maintain a similar vista as to when they purchased their property. They are not seeking to remove mature trees, they are seeking to move juvenile trees before they come mature, and which they say were planted without any consultation. The photos tendered to this motion are taken at angles which only show the current tree canopy cover from the ground level. The photos do not show all the angles or the views from the first and second levels of the affected properties, which will be obstructed when these newly planted trees grow to maturity. Whilst some may disagree, I don't think it's unreasonable to buy a house or an apartment on the foreshore with a significant view and have an expectation of maintaining that view. To do otherwise would deny the very real and direct effect of views on property values and amenities. And of course, those higher property prices have a positive flow-on effect to the prices of other properties in our city. On the other side of this debate, we have residents who are passionate about tree canopy, who, I acknowledge, have every right to have a say in how our community assets, including the foreshore, are utilised. However, I'm not persuaded that this debate is resolved by simply saying more people than not prioritise trees over views, when the people supporting that position are not the people materially affected by it. I am also not persuaded that residents with a view from their homes are the only residents who are protective about where trees are planted on the foreshore. For example, if we were to plant too many trees in the middle of the flagpole node, we'd lose the space where we hold our very successful large-scale community events like concerts. And if you line the foreshore footpaths with trees, you'd block the views of the skyline for our families having picnics. Now, some will say that trees enhance a vista and others will disagree. I'd suggest there's a reason you see the Perth CBD skyline on the tourism postcards and not trees. I am not persuaded that urban greening and significant views needs to be mutually exclusive. There is a third way, a compromise, where the reasonable expectations of those on both sides of this debate can find common ground, and where South Perth increases its green footprint and plants more trees. In this particular motion, we are dealing with 6 juvenile trees planted behind Lake Douglas in front of residents' views, which, while insignificant in height now, will grow to somewhere between 6 and 30 metres. And whilst these trees may have been planted to fence lines, as we all know, the width of a tree is not limited to its trunk. Should these juvenile trees reach maturity, the canopy will materially degrade the homeowner's views. Now, I agree that the area in front of Lake Douglas is a picnic spot used for families and there's a genuine need for shade in some form. I don't agree the area behind Lake Douglas, where these juvenile trees have been planted, is used by the wider community other than the footpath, a footpath of which is not in proximity to the shade these juvenile trees may provide in the future. I also agree that the fauna and flora of the Lake Douglas wetlands ought to be promoted and expanded as per Strategy 7.1 of our Foreshore plan. But what is not in that plan is the types of flora to be planted and where precisely they be located. That is discretionary and that requires a more nuanced approach. For those who are unaware, turtles come up from Lake Douglas to the residents' fences in about September each year. As you can imagine, adult turtles are slow and baby turtles are even slower. As we heard from the deputations last week, more trees between Lake Douglas and their homes have meant more birds but less turtles because the birds are eating them. Is this really something our community supports? What this motion proposes is that in exchange for moving the 6 juvenile trees, the city plant vegetation as a comparative replacement. Granted, this is not the same as tree canopy, it is a compromised position between competing interests. The reason for my amendment regarding location is that there might be a more suitable spot around the lake for this sort of low-level flora. It also allows, if it's suitable, for new plantings to be spread across different areas proximate to the lake. The reason for my amendment regarding enforcing a height limit is to ensure we aren't moving trees in part to preserve a view, only to replace them with shrubs which might not do the same
Councillor
thing.
Coveney, sorry to interrupt. That is 5 minutes. I'll move a motion. You be granted a further 5 minutes. Would anyone be willing? Councillor Prendeville, thank you. Councillors, could you please cast your votes on a motion that Councillor Coveney be granted a further 5 minutes to speak? That was unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Sorry for the interruption. Councillor Coveney, please continue.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The reason for my amendment regarding enforcing a height limit is to ensure we aren't moving trees in part to preserve a view, only to replace them with shrubs which might not do the same thing. We were told last week the reality is this type of low-level planting will likely be only up to 1 metre anyway. I've worked tirelessly to come up with what I say is a reasonable and workable solution, not just for the impacted residents, but for urban greening and wildlife. This solution has come about after roundtabling various options with the administration. First, the residents tried to deal with this issue directly with the city. After those discussions weren't fruitful, they reached out to their elected representative. I then raised the issue with the administration, who advised me the trees could not be moved without a notice of motion. The administration then asked I bring this motion at the same council meeting as the urban greening strategy, which I've done, notwithstanding I'm on approved paternity leave with a newborn at home. First, I proposed to relocate the trees, but was told survival was not guaranteed. Second, I proposed that for every 1 tree moved, a further 3 trees be planted elsewhere, but was advised that the tree planting needs to be part of a specific project. Third, I proposed that the existing trees be replaced with trees which would grow to a lesser height, but was advised trees of a lesser height would be inappropriate in this location. I understand that what I am proposing now in this amended motion is workable. A report just last month noted that the city had spent $25,000 removing 40 trees in Karrawara, which had recently been planted on public land in front of residents' properties. This was done at the request of this council following complaints from impacted residents who complained about a lack of consultation. Very few in the community batted an eyelid about that decision. And yet here we are now talking about 6 juvenile trees and the tone is jarringly different. I am concerned by the misinformation being spread, political motivations and the eat-the-rich undertones of some against this motion. South Perth consists of and welcomes people from many diverse backgrounds with different means, needs and opportunities. Why should we treat our affluent community any differently? Pleasingly, and as I suggested, if this motion is successful, the city will replant those 6 juvenile trees. And the report last month noted that of the 40 trees we removed from Karrawara, only 30% didn't survive. And let's be clear, the $30,000 referred to in this motion is not merely to move these 6 trees. About $27,000 of that amount is to plant the new shrubs, which is a further investment in urban greening and the creation of wildlife habitat. I'd like to acknowledge and thank those deputations last week, both for and against, which were respectful and engaged with the actual particulars of this motion. I hope that in the not too distant future there can be a settled policy position dealing with this issue to avoid angst to everybody involved. Because compromise solutions can and should be achieved with adequate consultation beforehand and with adequate consideration as to how particular areas are intended to be used, the distance between trees and homes, the height and width of trees at maturity, the distance between trees themselves, shade alternative and use of significance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Councillor Waugh, you're the seconder. Would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Once again, I want to acknowledge that this issue has generated passionate and thoughtful responses from our community. I've read them carefully and I appreciate them, and I want to assure everyone that their concerns have been heard and are taken seriously. As councillors, we are often asked to weigh competing community interests, environmental concerns, amenity, urban growth and livability, and sometimes, as in this case, those interests collide in deeply emotive ways. As someone who's dedicated over a decade to environmental law and worked with local governments across the state on planning environmental and amenity issues, I understand the importance of long-term urban greening strategies. And it's in that context I want to speak in support of Councillor Coveney's amended motion. This is not a proposal to simply remove trees. It is a considered reconfiguration that will see 135 square metres of replanting occur nearby, with new native vegetation that will support biodiversity and reinforce our foreshore's health and amenity for the wider community. To be clear, this motion has evolved significantly from its original form, and Councillor Coveney has listened to the feedback, and I thank him for that. His amendments reflect many of the concerns raised through public submissions, and they demonstrate that it is possible to hold space for both environmental protection and the lived experience of our local residents. It's worth remembering that this council has previously considered and supported motions relating to the removal of trees where residents have raised genuine concerns. As mentioned, in July last year, a motion was brought to remove trees through Karrawara following objections from residents, and it would be inconsistent to now dismiss similar concerns because of the location or assumptions about those who live nearby. This is clearly a widespread issue, and respect for resident input should not be conditional. I say that because there is a perception that this issue is about giving in to an entitled few, but I do not accept that characterisation. We can value trees and we can also respect the concerns of those directly affected, just as we did last year in Karrawara. At that time, Council took into account the specific concerns of the immediate residents, and I would suggest that this situation deserves the same courtesy. Listening to residents is not elitism, it's local democracy. And it doesn't mean that every request is granted, but it does mean that we approach these issues with empathy and balance. Some have argued that if we allow tree removals near Jubilee Street, we open the floodgates. But this is not about setting a precedent. It's about resolving a particular case where location, tree species and spatial context are unique. And that's why the motion is narrowly framed and tied to a replanting program that enhances, not diminishes, our foreshore. And it's worth noting that views are a valid and recognised planning consideration, not just in public discourse, but in law. In the case of Warden and the town of Mosman Park, the tribunal applied a three-step test to determine whether access to views of significance should be maintained in the circumstances of the case. So this isn't about giving primacy to views, but about acknowledging that they are a legitimate component of amenity, and like shade, noise and privacy, they too form part of a holistic assessment of urban space. But let's just zoom out for a moment and take a look at the bigger picture. Since the adoption of the city's urban forest strategy, we've planted nearly 5,000 trees. We've invested in shade, biodiversity and heat mitigation, not in slogans, but in real living canopy. And we are presently undertaking the Hurlingham Living Stream project, which will deliver an additional 40,000 plants across a critical ecological corridor. We remain steadfast in our commitment to greening South Perth, but it is also true that one-size-fits-all policies don't always translate well on the ground, and sometimes we need to make modest changes in that respect local context and deliver broader community benefit, including foreshore access, public usability, and yes, in some places, views. So this isn't about undermining our strategy, it's about applying it with nuance. The proposed new planting will continue to provide habitat for birds and insects, and it will enhance stormwater resilience. It will soften urban edges and create more usable picnic and gathering spaces for the broader public. It is not a net loss, it is a thoughtful redistribution. So to those who say we must never remove a tree once planted, I say this: the environment is dynamic, and so too must be our planning responses. Trees can and should be moved, replaced or redesigned in line with science, good design and evolving community needs, not just principle for principle's sake. I will always be a strong advocate for environmental protection because I believe in bold urban greening targets, in protecting biodiversity and in building resilient, healthy, connected communities. But I also believe that respectful governance requires flexibility. It requires us to listen, to consider each case on its merits, and to ensure that no one group, whether it's those calling for tree removal or those opposing it, holds a monopoly on what's right. This amended motion finds that balance. It acknowledges the rights of all the residents, those who value
Councillor
green
Ward,
views.
that's 5 minutes. I'll move a motion that you be granted a further 5 minutes. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Brenda Abrandis, thank you. Councillors, could you please cast your votes on a motion that Councillor Ward be granted a further 5 minutes? And that was unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Apologies, Councillor Wall, for the interruption. Please continue.
Thank you. This amended motion finds that balance. It acknowledges the rights of all residents, those who value green views and those who value skyline views. It honours our commitment to canopy growth, and it ensures that our foreshore remains a place for all, for people, for birds and to future generations. And just in respect of the latest amendment, I think in addition, calling for a councillor workshop no earlier than January to develop a policy on tree planting on public land is both a constructive and a future-focused step. It's clear from this and from previous issues that have arisen on similar matters that tension can arise between greening objectives and residents' amenity concerns. And whilst we've responded case by case, the time has come for a more consistent, transparent and guided approach. A policy developed in consultation with officers and grounded in sound planning principles would give us a framework to assess these situations more fairly and predictably in future, and help us avoid unnecessary division or politicisation of what should be balanced, evidence-led decisions. The timing of the workshop post-election, post-CEO appointment is also sensible. It ensures that we do not divert operational focus now, while still to improve policy clarity in this space. Ultimately, this amendment gives us the opportunity to set clearer expectations, reduce ad hoc decision-making and strengthen trust in our city's long-term approach to greening. So I do commend this motion with its amendment to the chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wall. Councillors, would anyone like to speak against the notice of motion before us? Questions, Councillor Brenda Brandis?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I've got a few questions on this item. With regard to the removal of the 6 juvenile trees that were planted in winter 2024, could I understand from the administration as to the timing of the removal of these trees, given that we are most of the way through winter now, and planting them outside of winter could be problematic with regard to young trees that have been relocated, and also in context of the timing of planting those removed 6 trees, should this motion pass, reflecting on the council workshop, which is January 2026.
Ms Amprimo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So if council were to pass this recommendation in the notice of motion tonight, then effectively we would implement the elements of that we were able to implement in the time frame that's there. So to be specific, item 1, we could remove those trees immediately following council's decision, subject to the logistics of doing it, but that would happen fairly imminently. In terms of relocating them, they've been in the ground a year. Relocation is unlikely to be successful. I think there was mention of the plants that were relocated through the Urban Greening Grants programme and the success rate there. However, they had only been in the ground up to a maximum of 10 days. With plants that have been in a year, the survival rate and the amount of resources that we might need to put in to try and get those to survive probably makes it not really a worthwhile investment of city resources. Investigating the locations for the alternative planting, we would have some fair indication pretty quickly of what we could do there, but obviously that's subject to the budget approval mentioned in item 3, but that would be through the mid-year budget review, which would be outside of the this planting season, so that would be done in early winter probably of 2026, and then obviously the workshop, we would have to have a look at what was involved in that, but that's not before the 1st of January anyway, so we'll probably look at that February, March next year.
Thank you, Director Amprimo. Just following on from your comment where you noted that investigate the appropriate location for the replanting of these 6 trees, does the administration have any indication as to where a suitable location would be, and if that would be on Sir James Mitchell Park or on the foreshore?
Ms Amprimo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So as the recommendation is written at the moment, it's to investigate appropriate locations within the vicinity of Lake Douglas. given that we're removing trees from that area, we would look for a location as close as possible to where the trees were being removed from. And we'd also need to look at the exact type of species that would be suitable for that location as well, bearing in mind the height restriction.
Thank you, Director Amprimo. Last week at the agenda briefing, it was announced with regard to this item that the proposal to compensate the 6 saplings that were to be removed would be offset with something similar to what is currently being undertaken for the Hurlingham Living Stream. Can the administration please confirm if that is in fact still the case, as it's not been articulated specifically in this motion?
Ms Amprimo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the motion stipulates not higher than 2 metres at maturity. To ensure that we met that criteria, we would be looking at plants that varied in height, but the taller ones probably having a notional height of between 1 and 1.5 metres, because obviously with plants it depends on the growing conditions. Even while they've got a notional height, they can grow larger or smaller. So we would look at something with heights of up to around 1 or 1.5 metres, but it would be likely a varied planting depending on the actual local ground conditions, moisture, that type of thing. And we'd look at getting our landscape architect to select suitable species for that area.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo. Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Director Amprimo. Has the administration received any objections to the 6 saplings prior to this motion being raised? And we heard this evening that the community tried to deal with this matter directly with the administration. So I'm just wondering, prior to this motion, these plants have been planted, these trees have been planted for over a year. Did the administration receive any objection? And also, how much objection did the administration receive, if any?
Ms Amprimo.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So residents did contact the city in relation to this matter. I haven't been able to establish exactly how many times. I'm aware that they did speak to different members of staff, which makes it a little bit difficult to track. But in summary, those conversations confirmed that the city would not remove all of them. There was a 7th tree there, which had been vandalised and would have grown in a very bushy form with a lot of epicormic shoots. So we agreed to remove that one because we wouldn't be able to suitably uplift it and create a canopy. And an undertaking was also given to the residents that the trees would be uplifted as they grew, so that whilst the actual canopy itself would be in place, underneath the canopy there would be vistas through that area.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo. Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Director Amprimo. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Has the Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions been consulted on the proposal to remove 6 saplings, understanding what their intentions are with regard to this particular area? And does this align with DBCA's vision?
Ms Amprimo.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So DBCA hasn't been consulted on the specific issue because it doesn't fall within the boundary of the Swan Canning Development Control Area. However, DBCA does recognise the city's Foreshore Strategy and Management Plan as a sort of guiding document for that area, and they were heavily involved when that was developed. So we haven't directly consulted them because it is actually outside of the development control area.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo. Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Director Amprimo. Since the agenda briefing last week, has the administration received any further requests from directly affected residents on Jubilee Street to also remove the additional 7 trees that were noted in a deputation? So these are the 7 trees on the north side of Lake Douglas.
Ms Amprimo.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I haven't been able to locate any such requests, no.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo. Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Director Amprimo. The amendment tonight, I think this is the third or the fourth amendment to this item, notes that a policy would be developed and undertaken in January 2026, no earlier than January 2026. With regard to the planting of trees on public land, can the administration advise what their view the public land might entail?
Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So public land would be considered land that is reserve of some form or has public use and is administered by the city, because that would be the land over which we would be able to have a policy, noting that the policy would be something that the city would have to comply with, but council could resolve to make decisions that were not necessarily consistent with that policy.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo. Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think this is my last question. Thank you, Director Ampremo. Just following on from the definition of public land, given that we are quite focused on foreshore with regard to views, would there be any indication that the workshop that we're proposing for trees on public land would also include the Waterford foreshore and the Melville Waters foreshore, and how would this impact trees on verges, which we actually have a separate policy for, which is also public land?
Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So it's not clearly defined in the notice of motion that's before us, but I would consider public land any land that is held by the city for public purpose. So we would need to look at how it related to other policies and either amalgamate policies or exclude one aspect of public land from any new policy that was proposed. But through the workshop process, council would be providing feedback on that draft policy anyway. So I think there'd be an opportunity to define the scope of it through that process.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo. Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Director Ampremo. No further questions for you. Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is just a procedural question. With regard to the additional $30,000 requiring approval, ordinarily for these items we'd have an absolute majority required. Do we need to note that with regard to this motion?
Ms Fryer, should I send that in your direction?
No, not for this item.
All right. I think I was asking if anyone wanted to speak against the notice of motion before us. Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The removal of the trees creates a dangerous precedent whereby people with homes abutting the foreshore would pressure council to remove established trees or even saplings that may inhibit their views. The precedent to prevent planting of trees in public open space is inappropriate and interferes with the administration's functioning. In July 2024, council approved a motion to prevent trees being planted on council verge, where the objection was from the immediate adjoining property owner and the adjacent owners. And this allowed for up to a potential 3 ratepayers to prevent the planting of 1 tree on a verge. And this cost $25,000 and resulted in significant delay in the 2024 winter planting program. This motion is not strategic, it's operational. It's proposing changes to a work program that were undertaken by the environmental team and undertaken with significant care and identification of appropriate locations for planting. Removing these 6 trees and the preventing of planting of trees and verges, both being on public open space for the benefit of the entire district, is appropriate. We only heard 3 deputations with regard to the 6 saplings. And the comments that were made included objection to saplings on public open space because it was used for recreating. It impacted views from the upper stories of the properties, and a balanced approach should have been considered. And that did include a conversation that maybe the other end of the South Perth Esplanade, which is sparse with trees, should be considered. There was also consideration in the deputations with regard to not being consulted with regard to planting trees on public open space. And we heard from the administration that with regard to this program, there was nothing that they did untoward. The properties adjacent to the saplings have no significant backyard vegetation, so appropriately trees on the public open space would be very appropriate. To replace existing trees for no justifiable reason would represent a waste of financial resources and impact the administration from undertaking operational activities, and this has undertaken a significant amount of the administration's time. The planting of these trees is appropriate and justified for the following reasons. This is consistent with the strategy for Node 7. The location of the trees to be on the lakeside of the footpath, being 35 to 50 metres from the nearest private property boundary. The planting of these trees was undertaken part of a planting program, and for over a year, objections weren't received by the administration. The planting was broadly aligned with the dividing property boundaries, and they weren't positioned directly in front of the properties. The purported loss of the view would be minimal due to the strategic planting, and this is clearly articulated in the officer's report. The planting of these 6 trees replaces previously existing trees, and some had been vandalised, such as the Columbia Calophylla and the Melaleuca. The 6 trees have been placed to improve drainage in the vicinity, and which will optimise future use of this location. So hydrology is really quite important. The species that were selected were based on local ground conditions, including the area that's waterlogged for extended periods of winter. The location is public land for the amenity and recreation for all, and not for the exclusive use of adjacent residential ratepayers. The trees support increased canopy cover and provide further fauna habitat. And the trees support the urban greening strategy and deliberative community consultation that was extensively undertaken with views to increase vegetation on the foreshore.
Councillor Brenda Abrandis, that is 5 minutes. I'll move a motion that you be granted a further 5 minutes to speak. Could I have a seconder? Councillor Coveney, thank you. Councillors, please cast your votes on a motion that Councillor Brenda Abrandis be granted a further 5 minutes. That was unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Sorry for the interruption. Councillor Brenda Abrandis, please continue.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, councillors. This motion is wrong for many reasons. It supports 3 ratepayers who made a deputation, and to the detriment of the district and the fauna. It removes trees that are critical to the canopy cover, and also managing the urban heating effects, fauna and the hydrology of these lands. The urban greening strategy included a priority for increased canopy cover and understory planting to provide shade and enhance habitat. It prevents the administration from planting trees on public property, and again, I refer to this as being a dangerous precedent. The request for the removal of these trees does not significantly compensate the extent as to why the trees should be there. It's fairly rich to ask for trees to be removed from public property when there is a limitation of significant trees on the adjacent properties. This request costs city ratepayers $30,000. The city is under attack by a foreign arboreal pest, the shothole borer. This could have potential devastating impact on our trees and consequently canopy cover. And for this reason, we shouldn't just be removing thriving trees. This motion now proposes to develop a policy on planting trees on public land. But this council did not support a local planning policy to protect trees on private property. So my expectation is the proposal for planting trees on public property would be detrimental to the outcome of the overall urban greening strategy, and that also is impacted by us not having protection for trees on private property. For these reasons, I don't support this motion to remove 6 thriving trees. We heard deputations from 3 residents last week, and I have received over 30 pieces of correspondence and communication from concerned members of the community as to why we should be retaining these trees and not removing them. So for these reasons tonight, I think this is very inappropriate, and it's put a significant amount of pressure on the administration. This is not a strategic motion. This is operational, and this should not have been brought to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Councillors, would someone like to speak in favour of the motion who hasn't already spoken? Councillor Prendeville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking in favour of Councillor Coveney's motion this evening. It's a difficult one, I know, and I think we can all agree on the wide-ranging and well-documented benefits of trees, shrubs and urban greening. These elements are not only essential for environmental sustainability, but also play a crucial role in enhancing our community's well-being. We've heard a lot of our residents speak of that this evening and last week. It's important for us all to understand the intention of the motion is not questioning the value of these trees, but instead to consider the suitability of their placement in this specific context. One of the most nuanced and challenging aspects of this topic this evening is striking the right balance between 2 legitimate and deeply valued interests: the protection and expansion of our green environment and the preservation of a person's significant view from their home and their amenity. And on one hand, trees and vegetation form an essential part of our urban fabric, and they help define the character of our neighbourhoods and public spaces, offering beauty, shade and a sense of connection to nature. And on the other, we must also acknowledge that residents have a right to enjoy reasonable amenity and the benefits of their property, including access to natural light, significant or iconic views included. I'd like to take a moment to commend Councillor Coveney for his thoughtful and constructive approach in reworking this motion. His efforts reflect a genuine attempt to find common ground and to balance a range of competing perspectives in what is a complex and emotive issue. He has engaged with stakeholders on all sides and refined his motion and has demonstrated a commitment to collaboration and practical outcome. This is not a simple either-or decision. It is about context, respect for different values held by our members of our community, and what is considered a nuisance by one person may be considered a natural beauty by another. It's why I believe it's crucial to establish clear and transparent and fair policy mechanisms that allow us to weigh these competing interests appropriately. I welcome the inclusion of a workshop as part of this process. This is an opportunity to come together in good faith and shape a policy that reflects both our shared values and collective responsibilities. I believe a workshop is a critical step forward in setting clear and workable guidelines. Ultimately, we can and must find a balance, as difficult as that may be. greener city and a livable city are not mutually exclusive, and with consultation, careful policy development, we can create outcomes that honour both our environment and the lived experience of our residents. As for these reasons, I support this motion and I look forward to collaborative work ahead in a workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prendiville. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the motion who hasn't already spoken? Councillor Navard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess the one thing that bothers me most is the kind of lack of clarity in why we're making these decisions. And to me, one of the major fallouts from that process is that we end up with partisan groups in the community that potentially can be in a conflicting mode. And so in the first instance, that's why I was seeking that deferral. I just think that it stirs up lots of issues. And if we don't have a clear pathway, then there's a potential for this to recur. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak in favour of the motion who hasn't already spoken? Is there anyone who wishes to speak against who hasn't already spoken? I'll say a few words. Councillors, last week we heard a number of deputations. That's good. Deputations give us the opportunity to listen to what our community has to say. One of the deputies, I haven't got much time, so I'm only going to pick one. One of the deputies last week was Dr. Sue Gilliott, President of the Salter Point Community Group. And Dr. Gilliott spoke to the motion that's currently in front of us right now. She said that the fate of these 6 trees is not a council matter, and this matter should have been dealt with at an administrative level behind the scenes. I hope I'm not misquoting her. Councillors, I'm very much inclined to agree. There is nothing strategic about this notice of motion. It is entirely operational in nature. Now, councillors, we do have the ability to bring motions that are operational in nature. That is true. Whether it's a good idea, well, let's explore that together. The first reason why I do tend to think motions of this nature are a bad idea, but I should explain why. The first reason that I think motions of this nature tend to be a bad idea is they tend to be a little bit reactive, a little bit knee-jerk, and quite often for the benefit of a fairly small number of people. In this case, Councillor Coveney tells us that he's been contacted by, open quote, over a dozen residents on Jubilee Street who are concerned about losing their $1 million views of the Perth CBD skyline as a result of 6 trees having been planted on the South Perth foreshore, close quote. Now, councillors, I don't doubt that those dozen Jubilee Street residents are genuinely concerned about the preservation of their views and what effect those 6 trees might have on their views. I accept that. But I do note that we've all received correspondence from many other residents. We've even received correspondence from other residents who also live in Jubilee Street and are asking us to retain the trees. But councillors, the point I want to make is this issue goes well beyond Jubilee Street. We all have a duty to act in the best long-term interests of our community as a whole. That's reason 1. Reason 2, why motions like this tend to be a bad idea is they're often short-sighted. They often cause more problems than what they solve. And in the current case, many people that have written to us, many of the deputations, many of the public questions, many of the councillors here tonight have all pointed out that if we pass this motion, we're going to get more requests from residents to remove council-owned trees. In fact, one of the deputations last week mentioned that the fellow would like another 7 trees removed for exactly the same reasons that Councillor Coveney wants to remove the current 6 trees. And so, councillors, do we have another $30,000 and another 135 square metres of public open space ready to go in exchange for those 7 trees? What about the request after that? What about the request after that? Councillors, if we pass this motion, we will be forced down one of 2 fairly unpleasant paths. The first path is that we continue to remove trees every time someone asks us to do that. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to support that. The second path is that we remove trees for some people, but we don't remove trees for others. And that's going to be kind of hard for us to justify in terms of consistent decision making. And councillors, if we are inconsistent in our decision making, there may well be some adverse perceptions about why some people are favoured and why others are not, and that will inevitably undermine public confidence in this council. By the way, we shouldn't be assuming that that views are the only reason why residents might request the removal of a tree. I've been an elected member for almost 8 years now. I can tell you that from time to time, not often, but from time to time, people will complain about the leaf litter that people are getting in their gutters from council-owned trees and asking, can we get rid of that tree? Well, no, we don't do that, but don't think that views are the only reason why people are going to ask us to remove trees. So in short, reason 2 is that passing this motion is going to create a very unfortunate and very problematic precedent. That's almost 5 minutes, so I'm going to interrupt myself. Councillor Coveney, you're kind enough to move a motion that I be granted another 5 years, not 5 years, 5 minutes. Thank you. Councillor Prendeville, you're seconding. Councillors, please cast your votes. All right, 5 minutes, not 5 years granted. Thank you all, that was unanimous. I do note that Councillor Coveney and Councillor Ward both referred to Council's decision in July of 2024 about trees in Carrawarra. Was that a good precedent, though? Councillor Brenda Abrandis has made a few comments on that, but we actually had a council report in the May 2025 meeting reporting on the outcome of that decision. I'm not allowed to criticise council decisions, but everyone can read that report for themselves. Third reason why motions like this tend to be a bad idea, and this is the big one, is they often undermine agreed plans or strategies that are there for the benefit of the wider community. We've all received a considerable volume of correspondence from our community over the last week or two, overwhelmingly voicing opposition to this motion. Many of those correspondents have alluded to how this motion is going to undermine our brand new, literally brand new urban greening strategy, and that's true. Let's take a look at our brand new urban greening strategy together. Page 183 of the attachments to this agenda, we see that the priority approaches for the strategy include conserving green areas first and increasing canopy. Page 106, we see that protecting the trees and green spaces that we already have is the very first pillar of our new urban greening strategy. Page 188, our strategy says that our objectives include protecting trees and our strategic priorities include protecting existing trees and that open quote, removing trees on city land is considered a last resort, close quote. We literally just passed that strategy, folks. I could go on, but I'll run out of time, but I hope that everyone understands that this motion is in direct contravention of our brand new urban greening strategy. It also undermines the city's South Perth Foreshore strategy and management plan. Councillor Brenda Abrandis has already alluded to that, so I won't repeat it, but it's also set out in the officer report in our agendas. So that's a second strategic document that this plan contravenes. The city administration quite correctly advised that the planting of those 6 trees was consistent with the council-approved strategy for Node 7. But I fear that Councillor Coveney's motion also, unintentionally, I'm sure, undermines the city's strategic goal of creating more public open spaces for sports and recreation. We're proposing to give up 135 square metres of public open space with ground cover at an estimated cost of $30,000 in exchange for those 6 trees being marked for removal. From a governance perspective, I'm concerned with how transactional that approach is. I'm uncomfortable with the precedent that sets. I don't think it's appropriate for council to be engaging in this kind of horse trading at such an operational level. I don't think that's our role. Decisions of this kind should be left to the city administration, and we should be focused on strategy. But more than that, I do not know enough about those 135 square metres of public open space and how it's currently being used by our community, or how it could be used by our community, to just give it away as a bargaining chip so that those 6 trees can be removed. I'm not aware of any research that's been done as to what the best use of those 135 square metres of public land is. But one thing I do know about those 135 square metres of public land is that that area gets waterlogged for extended periods during winter. That's stated in the officer report at page 36. And I can't help but think, in fact it's in the report, that those 6 trees will help with the drainage in that ground in the area, whilst still ensuring that the vast majority of that area is still available to our community for sports and recreation. I'm going to run out of time. The 4th reason why motions like this tend to be a bad idea is that we are not the experts in the room on these issues. And I mean no disrespect to councillors by this, but the fact of the matter is that city officers will very often have knowledge and expertise that we simply don't. That is why they're paid to advise us, and that's why we would be really wise to listen. Last week, Dr. Gilliatt said that on matters of good governance, we encourage councillors to understand their constituents' concerns early and engage collaboratively with city officers and consultants prior to draft proposals being put forward. I have to agree. I'm going to run out of time, but we all have a duty to act in the best interests of our community as a whole. This, at least to me, is a pretty clear case where, objectively assessed, the interests of the many quite obviously outweigh the interests of the few. I'm voting against this notice of motion, and I am foreshadowing the suggested officer recommendation. Thank you. All right. No applause. It's very nice of you, but no, I've got to be fair to everyone. Is there anyone who would like to speak either for or against who hasn't spoken yet? No? In that case, Councillor Coveney, you have 5 minutes to rebut any arguments made against the notice of motion if you would like to do so.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I thank those on council who, when we have different views, you express them to me and others before these meetings. By discussing alternative views beforehand, we have time to consider, learn and collaborate and to discover optimal solutions for our community. So I just continue to welcome open dialogue with every member of council. In relation to financial implications, look, the cost to plant low shrubs in this area is almost the same cost as council resolved in our annual budget last month to plant at the other end of the foreshore. And as we all know, council has from time to time allocated funds outside the budget council, including last year where we allocated $200,000 for concept plans at Node 2 Coode Street and $200,000 for the Carrawara upgrade, so a total of $400,000. And in our last mid-year budget review, we had an additional $1 million surplus, and we decided to spend about $125,000 at a zebra crossing at Ainsty Street. Comparative to these examples, the amount proposed to be spent in this motion is insignificant, but like the zebra crossing, achieves a significantly better outcome because it's an investment in urban greening and our wildlife. In relation to operational cost, we heard tonight this work would be done by someone else, it'd be contracted out, not by the city. In relation to setting a precedent, the outcome tonight doesn't set a new precedent for 3 reasons. First, it's a fundamental legal principle that every case should be assessed on its merits. The DBCA, of course, approved the Wesley rowing shed upgrades, which sees mature trees be removed. So like us, they assess every case on a case-by-case basis. Second, if there were a precedent, it's already been set when we said yes to the residents in Carrawara to remove 40 trees on public land. To vote no to this motion would be inconsistent with that decision. And third, my motion requires we have a workshop to develop a policy on the planting of trees on public land, i.e. where to plant trees, the consultation required before doing so, and assessing objections received against a set criteria. I won't be entertaining further requests to remove trees from public land until such time as that policy document is finalised, and I'm confident that other councillors feel the same way, and I'd really hope that the city is extra careful about where they're planting trees and how they're consulting people until that document is finalised. The reality is this issue has arisen as it did with the Karrawara issue because impacted residents didn't feel as though they'd been adequately consulted and considered. So I really hope we can learn some valuable lessons from this. In relation to operation over strategy, look, if we aren't prepared to stand up for our residents, then who will? I understand, Mr Mayor, you've been a big advocate of views over trees at the other end of the foreshore several years ago. In relation to community feedback, look, I received equal parts in favour and against, and those against have largely been the same people who email us all about every tree issue that comes before council. And in relation to the resident you mentioned on Jubilee Street that was opposed, he doesn't actually live on the foreshore, he lives behind those houses that do have the views. In relation to administrative consultation, suggestion that I didn't, I very much did, and I went into significant detail about how much effort I went into that consultation. In relation to a comment about strategy and location, my motion's very clear. It's to plant shrubs in the wetlands. It's not used for football fields. And it's consistent with our foreshore plan 7.1, which is to plant around that area. So it is entirely consistent. In conclusion, the South Perth foreshore is 62 hectares. There are so many other areas where planting trees which would grow to such heights would not cause such discourse. This motion finds a middle ground in protecting significant views, promoting wildlife and promoting urban greening, whilst giving council a pathway to deal with these sorts of issues moving forward by establishing a clear policy to do so. So I commend this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Councillors, the notice of motion is going to the vote. Please cast your votes. Okay, so the votes are in. Councillor Coveney's motion has passed, 4 votes to 3. Those in favour were Councillor Coveney, Councillor D'Souza, Councillor Prendeville and Councillor Waugh. Those against were Councillor Brenda Brandis, Councillor Navard and myself, Mayor Milner. All right, we're moving on to item 12.2, which is a notice of motion from Councillor Nick Coveney entitled Transport Advocacy. Once again, there's a request from Councillor Navard to move a deferral. Folks, I'm going to adopt the same approach here. Councillor Coveney was first in time, but I'm going to ask Councillor Coveney if he has any objection to Councillor Navard moving a deferral, if she would like to do so, before we move the item 12.2. Councillor Coveney?
I'm satisfied with that, thank you.
All right. Councillor Navard, did you still want to move a deferral motion? All right.
Yes, please, Mr Mayor.
If you could please read your deferral motion, then I'll see about a seconder, and if there's a seconder, we'll have a debate.
Right. I wish to propose that the council defer agenda item 12.2, notice of motion, Councillor Nick Coveney, transport advocacy. That consideration of this item be deferred to the month following the month our new CEO steps into their role, so that our newly appointed CEO would take carriage of the matter moving forward should council approve the item at that time.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. Would anyone like to second? Councillor Brenda Brandis as seconder. Councillor Navard, the floor is yours for your reasons.
Thank you. I have 5 reasons here. The City Executive Group is presently down in numbers by 2 members, and this means City staff will be under some pressure in dealing with the City's usual administrative calendar of requirements. There is no reason to treat this motion, 12.2, as of immediate importance. It can be held off for a short period of time without any increased inconvenience being placed on our community and its stakeholder groups. Councillor Coveney is proposing a lobbying strategy for drawing attention to and seeking some clarification and commitment from the state government regarding the increased traffic in the city of South Perth, and particularly as this relates to Mill Point Ward, by reviewing the public transport options that might be added to the city's current options in the foreseeable future. Should council agree to this delayed arrangement, this would be a role most suitable for our new CEO to undertake. It would be a cleaner and more professional approach to the matter to allocate this task to the new role shortly after the incumbent's arrival. It would provide an opportunity for them to have their leadership associated with the City of South Perth, as well as promptly building some valuable, positive public relations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. Councillor Brenda Brandis, you're the seconder. Would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support this deferral for the exact same reasons. I think it's appropriate that the appointment of a CEO should be instrumental in engaging with the state government and any potential outcomes. And also for the reason that we are currently short of 2 permanent executive members. The administration has been placed under a lot of unnecessary additional burden over the last couple of months, and we have a state election coming up. So for those reasons, I think it's only appropriate that this item does get deferred, and I am supportive of the deferral. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Brandis. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to speak against the deferral motion? Councillor Coveney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, first, there's no time limit on this motion. If the administration so chose, and I'd be comfortable, they could wait until the new CEO starts anyway. There's been a number of occasions where councillor-led motions without time limits have been passed and not implemented for several months, and no one, I think, has taken any issue with that approach. So I've got no difficulty with that same approach being adopted now. And second, what's being proposed is not actually materially burdensome. We're talking about writing a letter. I could knock it out in half an hour myself. And I'm pretty confident in the abilities of our team. So, look, I don't think it's burdensome, and I don't think it's best practice to defer items. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Councillors, would anyone like to speak in... a question, Councillor Brenda Brandis?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've just got a couple of questions on the item. So, firstly, from memory, I understand that the administration has previously raised the questions with regard to public transport, extending the jetty services into South Perth. Can the administration please advise when last we engaged with the state government on these matters?
Who should I direct this one to, folks? Ms Amprimo?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I need to take that on notice because it was actually done by the previous CEO. I believe it was done in Mike's time, so that will give you an idea of time frame.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo. Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Director Amprimo. A follow-on question from my previous one. Given that the previous CEO did engage with the state government, and I recall it wasn't that long ago, would it not still be appropriate to consider that circumstances haven't changed? Demand probably would not have changed with regard to public transport, and our population hasn't significantly increased, over the last year and a half. So, taking that into consideration, would it not be appropriate to maybe consider this request at a later point in time?
Ms Amprimo, should I send that your way?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will try and answer that question, although it was something that was being dealt with by the Office of the CEO. I believe the approach to advocacy is to continue to take opportunities to advocate for something that council supports. Council can resolve to send the letter to the state government, or it could choose to do it at another time. It's really something that council should consider.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo. Councillor Prendeville, speaking or asking a question?
Asking a question, if I may.
Fire away.
If this motion was to pass with the letter without a time frame on it, would the administration prefer to wait until the new CEO? Would that be their approach to to this motion?
Mr Scott, should I send that your way?
Yep, through the chair. It can happen either way. It's if, as I understand, letters have already been sent, it would be relatively easy just to reiterate those letters that have already been sent. It really depends on the urgency of council.
Thank you, Mr Scott. All right, I think I was asking if anyone wanted to speak in favour of the deferral motion who hasn't spoken yet. Any takers? I'll say a few words. So, I have no issue with the substantive intent of Councillor Coveney's substantive motion. I do believe that a South Perth train station is necessary in light of the projected population growth of our district. We know that the South Perth road network is going to be over capacity in less than 5 years, and we sure don't have the ability to build new roads to accommodate for all those extra cars. Alternative modes of transport must be made available to prevent gridlock on our roads, because traffic gridlock will result in lost productivity and economic and social stagnation. Certainly believe that better use should be made of Perth water for public transportation, have said so for some time. Would love to see something like the Brisbane River City ferries on Perth water. I am aware that local governments don't enjoy a great track record of success when it comes to what some people might call megaphone diplomacy. I would very much like to get our advocacy approach on these very important issues correct. And elected members are all aware that the city is presently working on an advocacy strategy. It seems sensible, at least to me, that the substantive issues raised in Councillor Coveney's substantive motion should form part of that advocacy strategy. I don't think there's an urgency here. We've been waiting on a South Perth train station for, I think it's 23 years since it was originally announced, so probably not a burning time frame here. I do think that Councillor Navard's suggestion that we adjourn this to and hopefully weave it into our advocacy strategy is probably the best way forward. That's me. Would anyone like to speak against the deferral motion? No? Anyone else wish to speak in favour? Question, Councillor Brenda Brandis?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just following on from Councillor Coveney's comment that this letter would be quite a straightforward letter to the state government and could be prepared by him within half an hour. Just understanding that would the administration be able to comment as to whether that would be appropriate, or whether from a newly appointed CEO in building that relationship, if that would be more appropriate?
Mr Scott, I'm going to send that your way because I don't know who else to send it to.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through the chair. Look, in all honesty, I don't think the appointment of the new permanent CEO is really going to change the delivery of advocacy to the state government. It's really what is the state government's likely response. And you know, within my short time at the city, it doesn't seem that, as some of the items mentioned in the motion on notice, is a high priority of the state government. So I would suspect that if myself as the current CEO or the new CEO was to advocate, we'd most likely get a similar response that we may have previously received if a similar advocacy was made a few months ago.
Thank you, Mr Scott. Would anyone like to speak either for or against who hasn't already spoken on the deferral motion? No? Councillor Navard, if you wish to say anything up to 5 minutes in rebutting any of the arguments made against the deferral motion, now's your opportunity.
Oh, thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I guess the only thing I would reiterate is that I think it's a smoother process if we move to passing that responsibility to the new CEO when that person arrives, giving 1 month so that the considerations can be put together. I think it's an opportunity that we're missing if we don't do it that way, because it would be a way of cementing the presence of the new CEO to our business. And as we discovered, we're also having a workshop on a related topic, and so that to me makes it quite a timely decision to defer consideration. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. So, councillors, I'm going to put the deferral motion to the vote. This is not Councillor Coveney's substantive motion on item 12.2. It is Councillor Navard's deferral motion. Please cast your votes. All right, so the votes are in. The deferral motion has been carried 4 votes to 3. Those who voted in favour were Councillor Brenda Abrandis, myself, Mayor Milner, Councillor Navard and Councillor Prendeville. Those who voted against were Councillor Coveney, Councillor Waugh and Councillor D'Souza. Okay, that concludes item 12. Bear with me, folks, while I reorganise my notes. All right, we move on to item 13, which is questions from members. Item 13.1 is responses to previous questions from members taken on notice. That's nil. Item 13.2 is questions from members. Are there any questions from members tonight? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have some questions which I've previously provided through to the administration with regards to the removal of a significant tree on the corner of Clydesdale and Devolac Streets. The tree appears to be on the verge, but it might very well straddle the boundary. And the tree was part of, the development for the site was part of a JDAP consideration in November 2022. The application considered including the updated landscaping with regard to that development and identified in a variety of plans that were submitted the trees that were to be included in that plan. And only recently, in this last month, the tree has now been removed. Now, the tree was noted as being required to be retained as a significant eucalyptus tree on that site. So I have a few questions for the administration. So could I understand what sort of communication was undertaken with the property owner or the developer for that site and subsequently following the tree's removal?
Ms. Shaw?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So effectively, you're correct. It was a 2022 JDAP decision for a development over the site. That approval did include retention of the lemon-scented gum on the Clydesdale Street frontage. After the building permit was issued and once the works had started to commence on the site, the builder had raised concerns with the structural integrity of the tree, and they sought advice from an independent arborist before they continued to carry out works on the site. That arborist advised the builder that it's likely that the structural roots of the tree had been compromised, and as such, the builder sought some further advice from the city in that respect. The city then requested the arborist provide some further advice in respect to the tree as to whether or not it could be retained or not, and whether there were any measures that could be undertaken to protect the tree despite the works that had already commenced on the site. That arborist advised that unfortunately the tree had been compromised and was a risk and would likely fail and cause safety risks to the public. The city then undertook its own independent assessment of that tree to determine whether or not the findings of the arborist report were correct, and did agree with those findings that health of the tree had declined to the point that it required removal. As a result of that advice, and given the fact that it was a previous JDAP approval with a landscape plan requiring that tree be retained,
it wasn't just a matter of the tree being able to be removed as it would otherwise occur on private property. The city requested that the developer submit an amended development application to modify that condition. And as a result of that, they were required to provide an updated landscaping plan that showed the tree obviously removed, but to provide additional plantings over that site to otherwise offset, for lack of a better word, removal of that tree. And obviously the city understands that you can't otherwise offset removal of such a significant tree. However, given the tree would otherwise be removed, it was an opportunity for the city to condition additional plantings on that site. The conditions of that landscaping plan required planting of new mature trees, which was 1,000 litre replacement trees, which is greater than what would otherwise be required for a standard landscaping plan, but was considered warranted in this respect on the back of the significant tree being removed.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Director Shaw. Thank you, Mr Mayor. So just to clarify, the proposal with regard to the loss of that tree, what species were identified and what sort of height would they get to? Would they sort of approximate the height of the lemon-scented gum?
Ms Shaw?
Thank you. Yes, so it was the lemon-scented gum that was removed and the replacement trees were flooded gums.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Director Shaw.
All right. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Navard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Reflecting its predominantly residential and commercial character, City of South Perth comprises mainly private land. There's a certain irony in the rigour with which canopy cover is defended in the public space, yet lack of foliage cover and lack of biodiversity in the private space lags much further behind. I was just wondering if there was some way we could put those comparative data measures into our some of our measurement strategies, so that hopefully the community will become a little more attuned to the problem that the silent problem of private land.
I'll allow it, but just a gentle reminder to everyone that questions from members aren't supposed to relate to items that have been before council at this meeting. But Ms Shaw or Ms Amprimo? Ms Amprimo.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So one of the streams in this strategy that's been adopted is around that education piece, which will help support communities' understanding of what they can do on private land.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo. Any further questions for the administration, councillors? No. Okay. All right. That brings us to item 14, which is new business of an urgent nature introduced by the decision of the meeting. That's nil for this evening. Item 15 is when we would ordinarily close the meeting to the public if there was any reason for us to do so, but there's not, so we won't. And that brings us to item 16, which is closure. Before I close tonight's meeting, thank you to everyone for your attendance and participation. I mean that to elected members, staff, members of the community, everyone. I declare this meeting closed at 8:52 p.m. Thank you all, and good night.